with Spirit of Matter. And the reason I'm broadcasting from 2:31 a.m. in Israel is actually because I was just dealing with a curse that had to do with causing me injustice. And as you can see, the ascendant is slowly applying to Spica, the midheaven to Procyon. 22 midheaven, whether they wanted to kill me, backfires. Um, Moon conjuncting retrograde Mercury. So this is something they attempted in the past, and they probably try to do it again now that Mercury is retrograde. And we have Mars hour of a Jupiter night. So they probably went for my business. Okay, Sol is on Antares. It's a good time to call on Antares. Spica, Procyon, and then of Algady, and Regulus to remedify that. And you feel that you wake up, you feel that dryness in your eyes. Um, they learned that sexual assaults backfire. That means that they would feel what they wanted me to feel. So they're trying with inversion of justice because they talk about war crimes, right? Naturally, it's a crime against humanity to do what they do. Naturally, they do more crimes against humanity. Naturally, they talk about technology that's able to diagnose that. And it's punishable by death. So see this 22 ascendant, 22 midheaven. We talk about somebody whose career is to do crimes against humanity, but to assassinate people specifically. And people can be because of religion or young children or trade. So that's human trade, that's child trade. Double time signification of child trade because of Jupiter and Mercury. So um, and of course we're talking about the inversions because you see Mercury is retrograde. That means they tried that in the past. And they're trying to touch on the fertility, the breasts, and really weird things that, of course, backfire very malefically. Like, it's not something I would recommend anybody to try. You would feel what you wanted the other person to feel, and let's begin to backfire it for anybody that ever tried, so that all the people who don't have talisman, all the people that can't fend for themselves, all the people that don't know what it is, um, will receive this healing with a message that they will run into or synchronize into the solution, the knowledge of what it was, and how to backfire it. Um, we can call it on Procyon because Procyon is about denucleafication. And first of all, let's diagnose of what they did, okay? So Mars is releasing his degree 6, opposing Pluto. So it's still releasing from opposition to Pluto. There's a point here with vertex in Gemini. And Mars is applying to trine the Sun, okay? I'm sorry, Sun is separating from trine to Mars. So for the Sun, it's a separating aspect. And then it leaves Mars kind of alone with Pluto. Okay, because that sextile to vertex is accidental, and then it has Mars kind of opposing Pluto. Mars in the sign of Sol, and Sol is on Antares, so I guess they thought they would win this because of Antares. But again, we could call immediately on both Regulus and Antares. So that would have been something that may be coming from royal bloodline, royal army commanders, like Idonevo. Okay, this is not serving for the IDF. He's serving for some royal army, maybe the British monarchy, maybe the Dutch monarchy, I don't know. So again, I mean, it would be a good idea to let me sleep a good night's sleep, right? And calling on Antares and calling on Regulus. Regulus is about prosperity and wealth and visibility and fame and honors. That and we call I call and I call on Apollo to abolish tyrannical abuse of that. Okay, why kings lose mandate of the heaven? Because they misuse their Mars, right? They get hanged, they get murdered, they get assassinated, or they die from cardiac arrest as they prescribe to all their citizens, or they murder the citizens. Okay, they lose mandate of the heaven. And we can call on Regulus and Antares here. Um, and that is, Antares is about being victorious. So to be victorious upon inversions, tyranny. If you think about tyranny as an inversion of a kingdom, before there was democracy, and we are included in Aquarius, so this is a time where the power shifts to more decentralized forms of governance and self-governance, okay? Especially with the Pluto Saturn, so structure of self-governance. Saturn, Aries is a strong self-governance. Okay, so think about it, loss of sovereignty, it's a strong, the antidote is strong self-governance. Think about Pluto in Aquarius, where I was expecting us to see things on the news. I saw things, but they're mostly hidden from the eye. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un declared war on USA. None of us heard about it. Okay, we know that they send troops to fight Ukraine. Yeah, but no, that's the difference between sending some troops somewhere. I mean, on Syria land, there are some troops from everywhere. Okay, it's a very interesting point about Syria, because Syria has been diverse in culture. I once spoke with a person that I thought was Slavic, and then he told me that he's Arabic, and then he said that he's from Syria. And he was a refugee in Europe, and I asked him what would he do if he was leader of Syria, and he said that he would make Syria so known for its richness of culture, because so many cultures, that people would ask for passport like they ask for the USA. Okay, and I was like, wow, that is such an awareness of culture that as a country that relies on technology mainly, I wasn't even considering. So but you think about the richness of cultures, and you think about also that there are many people fighting on Syrian land, which is creating another Holocaust. Like that's creating a Nazi Germany. There were 300 wars on Nazi Germany land before Nazi Germany became a Nazi Germany. And so let's talk about, Regulus and Apollo as, yes, it is fame, it is honors, um, but you don't want to misuse that, because then you lose mandate of the heaven. This is why for people whose sun is malefically aspected, and that's Caitlin Kapuk teaching, working with Regulus can be a way to facilitate and curate connections between with father figures, with leaders. And what I wanted to say is that kingdom, before there was democracy, okay, kingdom is something that's supposed to serve the people. If you think about King Leopold, and before there was democracy, that's what we knew. We knew a chief for a tribe, and we knew a king for a kingdom, right? So curses and misuse of royal army is basically an inversion on a kingdom, and the king that does that loses mandate of the heaven. Okay, if you think about the sun upside down, you think about a hanged leader, right? Somebody who misuses their Regulian power, the Regulian bloodline, gonna be, and the misuse is basically to do something inverted. And somebody that misuses that, essentially, they're gonna go together with the inversion. It's gonna be an inversion of a king. What is an inversion of a king? And I think it was in China. I don't remember if it was Mao or which king. I don't remember what would be the Chinese word for that. But they put the person that was the king of the continent, or the leader, or the tyrant, to swipe the streets. And they said that that was a correct punishment. So the punishment was not to degrade him or to humiliate him in any way, shape, or form. It was like, now you're going to be one of the commoners. You're going to swipe the streets with us. And that would not be offensive to a king. Okay, King Leopold would not mind to swipe the streets because there would not be an element of degradation towards the people. Okay, the people that swipe the street every day create rejuvenation in our roads. You think about, I'm here working as well with road opener, vice versa and sundry. If you think about road opening, if you think about the role of wiping the streets, clear swiping the street as a road opener. Okay, if I think about a job as swiping the street, you think about yourself as a road opener for the people on the path. The only the problems we have with jobs today is that you're expected to be espionage, which means sexpionage, which means MK Ultra. Like if somebody would give me a job to swipe the streets, I would find it therapeutic. I wouldn't if that is done in a way that respects for my body, and I am safely housed, and I can do a side project where I tend to my garden. I can paint. I can do my hobbies. I can tend to maybe doing something more with them. That would not be a problem for me. Okay, that would be a great job if it's good conditions every day to swipe the street clean. So you make path for the new day. It's a very valuable job. But then what the concept of the people was, they were bringing that person to the everyday life. Now you're going to swipe the street with us. Now you're going to be as one of the people. And that is such a merciful and Procyon. Okay, we could go on Procyon here. So we talk about Antares, and let's call on Antares. And Antares is associated with the Valhalla arena where people will fight to the death. But Antares is also a victory that is a big victory, a giant victory, a big win. Um, and the way to work with Antares is, remember that this is a Jupiter domain. It's Mars and Jupiter. So I'm recalling another experience that we worked, which was Mars and Jupiter in Aries. And while Mars in Aries can be very impulsive, or strong Mars can be very impulsive, Jupiter is about the gentle giant that reminds us what we're fighting for and dictates the use of energy. So, example, if you're fighting it to win it, what is your objective regarding the tyrant? Oh, swipe the street with us. But then, what if the street does war crimes? Well, make sure they don't do that anymore. So swipe the street with us. What if they do that in energy? Well, make sure that each and every voice is heard and they don't do that anymore. If that helps, you can swipe the street with us. What if that doesn't help? Well, then there is a series of punishments which can ensue death. So think about the sweetening of the verdict. We think about Antares as in it to win it, but because it is a benevolent, Jupiter is benevolent, okay? So the inversion of it would be trying to call on Antares for not a benevolent win. And you see how good that this is something that I do. I open a chart, okay? And I call on Antares for a benevolent win. And this is a benevolent act of leadership. And so Antares in that regard is serving to remove the tyrannical, to remove the inversion of a king, the inversion of a tyrant, the inversion of a royal army commander, especially if they're religious or cult or sect related. That's Jupiter as well. The inversion of a preacher, okay? And the inversion of a father figure, because there's also, okay? Um, and to be victorious in, okay, in doing that. And so we retrieve Antares, we retrieve our egregore, so it's not used as the inversion of a wind, but an actual wind that is benevolent and in favor of ourselves, humanity. And then we talk about Procyon, because Procyon, we talked about the sweetening of the verdict, talking about mouse swiping the streets. I think about how with Antares I immediately recalled mouse swiping the streets. Um, I can't believe that people actually send sexual assault right now. Like the stupidity. Let's have a moment of silence for somebody who sends sexual assault around the bum to somebody who is holding a talisman of Mercury and have Mercury opposing Pluto and has a talisman of Pluto, and in general. Okay, let's have a moment of silence for them. You're sending sexual assault, you're trying to assault somebody's bumhole, okay? It backfires. So let's have a moment of silence for those who send that. And you see, Mars is alone with Pluto, and it is Mars hour. And it's not the time to say Samak. You hear it? Samak. Okay? Of course it is Amak, because you try to send sexual assault to somebody that backfires. Then I bless you with changing that pattern so that your life is better. You stop cursing people, stop trying to enslave people, and you won't be removed. Okay? The inversion of a king is a tyrant, is somebody that tries to enslave, and that is, okay, backfiring. I know Antares is squared by Saturn, but Saturn is Jupiter ruled, so we can call on Antares again. And you have to understand, Jupiter is a philosophical win as well. Taurus is in Jupiter sign, so we're talking about the worldview. If you send sexual assaults and you still hold the worldview of that's somehow okay in any constellation, and you want to profit from that because you want to enslave people to that, there is no philosophy that stands for you. It doesn't matter what your religion or your lodge is. There is no moral justification for that. And Antares is about being aligned with that which is moral justification. Okay, again, we're talking about Antares, not the inversion. Antares is also the prevailing upon the satanic inversions of a win. You're not going to use Valhalla to perpetuate endless war. Okay, so this is where, for example, I stand. You're going to take a shot of that, and we're going to move on to the current chart. We're going to talk about the sexual assault as well. So, and again, the ascendant is only getting closer to ascendant is right on Spica. So that's like immediately Procyon, Spica, then Avalgadi Regulus, and Antares. Oh, I see Vertex was going through Aldebaran, so they thought, I don't know what they thought. Like, it doesn't look like thinking. And they get, like you see, again, these attempts to use Mars malefically, which causes it to be an impotent, reduce sperm count. And let's call on Spica. Okay, Spica is about fair trade, eloquence, justice, and Procyon is okay, sweetening, but also denucleafication. And Spica is about justice. You think about the if somebody makes some crime against humanity, so that to be exposed. And Mars is a great exposer. Okay. Pluto is exposing the things at the end of Capricorn, and then Mars is like, hey, there are things in Leo too. Because Capricorn is the Pluto Corsair. Think about the government. They're just like, well, what about the royal family? What about the crown? What about the royal army crown army? What about the fact that the IDF has people that serve the royal crown more so than they serve it? What about that? Even if you think about it as Zwagan ala Bibi, and you see immediately there's attempts to cause injustice towards me, which of course backfire. Sachtak, of course Sachtak, because you serve a king, and you try. There are attempts to have a king in Israel, like King David, which is an inversion on the spirit of the times, an inversion of governance, and an inversion on everything that Israel stands for. We can go on better per se, but even for a while they called the IDF Zwagan ala Bibi, and there were people who were fans of Hapoel, which is Ultra Hapoel, which is MK Ultra. It's not even anything but that. So they basically declared loyalty to Hapoel and then now to the state. I'm like, that's so very sweet, except you declared loyalty to MK Ultra, which means loyalty to sex trafficking, sexpionage. Maybe you're invested in that with rosy money. That's crime against humanity. That's punishable by death. And it definitely doesn't sit in with labor, right? Hapoel is labor. So we wouldn't have gotten there if we didn't see places, the bullies in the games of Ajax, and the other group that did vandalism to supposedly provoke. Well, the crime for vandalism is being arrested, not thrown into the river to die, or thrown into the lake to die, or the canal to die, not beaten to death. Okay, that's in a normal country. You arrest people if they do vandalism. It's true. If it's genuine vandalism, let's also talk about protest is not vandalism. Okay, if it's Kristallnacht type of vandalism, then you arrest these people. But if it's Kristallnacht type of vandalism, there's also vandalism. There's also aggression towards people. There's not vandalism anymore. So the punishment for vandalism is not death. I think I don't need to remind that to the people who are arguing for neutrality on YouTube. Okay, like I totally buy into that vandalism argument against Maccabi fans, and you see how that is related to events that were around the Mercury retrograde. And yeah, it's given in Donovan. I mean, it is given Donovan, although I know Itamar Yaron is also involved. Yeah, you guys are involved in human trafficking, kidnapping, creating sexpionages, MK Ultra, which is not an intelligence, but an inversion on intelligence, because a raped soul cannot give you a whole picture. Okay, their fragmented soul cannot give you a whole picture. So you're not even doing anything for the security of any state. It's an inversion. And now we're talking about the idea of perpetual war and the fact that these actions are supposed to stir up perpetual fight, perpetual war. Well, here we have, okay, let's just say, we have been for a month or two within the Mars opposed Pluto, and we're going to be there till April. So we have a little bit of atmosphere of what it's like to have perpetual war. I want you to write down in the comments below, whoever you're watching this, how do you feel having a perpetual war so far? How is it going? Do you like that? Applied. This is an applied. We have applied couple of months. We have perpetual war. This is Mars opposing Pluto. And Mars is now almost alone with Pluto. So there's really nothing interferes. We have a very real, experience of what would it be like to be in this transit forever? Okay? Perpetual war is trying to create a Mars hard aspect Pluto transit, like the opposition is immediate conflict, armed conflict, especially now in Leo. And say, let's have this as the transit that humanity operates by forever. And this is why the MK Ultra people or the Gate people, they would be expert in the manipulation of time Because what it means to curse astrologically, it means to put a timeline on another timeline. Just like to remediate is to put a timeline on another timeline, or to bring in what's in the timeline. Because if they do inversion, all I gotta do is like, hey, they did inversion of Justice Speaker. Woohoo! They did an inversion on denuclearification. Procyon. Okay. They did an inversion on tyranny and a royal army. Regulus. Okay. Sun is on Antares. They did an inversion on Valhalla, because Valhalla is kind of like considered a place where people come to fight to the death and so on. But they want to perpetuate like a Valhalla. I'm like, no, Valhalla is a place where army is trained. So now, again, the way that it was is not necessarily the way it should be. But yes, there is a training place for fighters, and but the win of the Antares is about benevolence. The whole concept of fighting is so that you can fend for benevolence, fend for beliefs, and fend for the idea that everybody's entitled to sovereignty and belief. You can't if you agree. Oh my God, this is such a good war teaching. I can feel this Jupiter Mars kind of working. I don't even have it with me. But that's the thing, when you interact or purchase something from a company that sells talismans, and you see how those interact with each other. Also, when you make talismans, then you see you're gonna get the energy and the teachings, like they're gonna be there when you need them. And you think about a great war teaching is Mars is ruling over Scorpio and Aries. Okay, you can't fight against somebody else's sovereignty. You can fight to assert yours. Okay, this is why Aries always wins. Okay, because they have a small fight, an impulsive fight. If they overdo it, because not overkill, if they overdo it, they're like, okay, that was whatever. Like, then bye, that's over. Okay, they are almost like a teenager or a child. They're gonna fight for what they want. Okay, but the other person is entitled to fight for what they want, and you can't fight against somebody else's sovereignty. Okay, you can assert your own. So, for example, if somebody sent a sexual assault towards me, I said backfire. That's it. Okay, I assert my boundaries. I don't know what you're gonna do about that, but you said that. Okay, now the Aries. Okay, back to sender. Bye bye. Yeah, I'm not going to interact with that. And so Aries is about sovereignty, identity, way making. So you cannot fight against somebody having their way in the world. So again, as long as it doesn't violate your sovereignty, okay? Your sovereignty cannot be, if you think about capitalism, okay? You're entitled to your house, to your property, to your this, to your that. You're not entitled to the entire earth. That is why we invoke the second. Think about John Locke. Okay? You're entitled to own. You're entitled to your own. Okay, your divine being, entitled to your own. You're entitled to defend for that by any means necessary. And then we get the Scorpio part, which is the waters of the well. And that's a deep transformative power. So we talk about sexuality. You're not entitled to rape. Not only does it harm the blood flow, you begin to come on dopamine addiction rather than vasopressin, oxytocin. There's all these things that are created in intimacy. You can't Mars without Venus, and I'm not talking about gender. We're talking about connection. We're talking about all these things that your blood needs to flow correct. These things open your heart chakra. And connection between, the root to heart, okay? Second chakra to throat. So those connections, it's all connected to everything. You think about root to heart, and then second chakra to throat. So To have relation, you need to be able to speak up, say yes, no, and maybe as you see fit. And you have to be able, and to get to open your heart, you need to be safely grounded. That's why when, for example, women don't have the safe ground that they have, they begin to become what? Hysterical, right? Stifling, hysterical, avoidant, not speaking to you, speaking very rudely. Why? Because they don't have the roots. If they're afraid for their lives and you try to have sex with them, they're not okay. They need to have their own separate, autonomous root connection with the soil, the garden, the housing, okay, the basic survival needs to even be considering, and that should be never threatened by any circumstances, especially not loss of ability to work. Okay, you got to get that. She's right, even when she didn't express herself, because taking the root away and taking our ability to express it, that backfires very malefically. And so, and also for you, you need to be connected with your root, with your ground, to open your heart. This is why a lot of men feel like, before I get to that job, before I get to this, before I get to be able to support a family financially, okay, don't ask me to date you seriously, because that's going to harm any baby that can be born, even when you put a condom, okay? That's a true, honest, responsible man, okay? Not the inversion of a man, but a true, honest, responsible man. So if it gets too hard to get to the root, you're like, okay, maybe non-committed relationship or the second chakra, okay, compromising on the second chakra, maybe something casual, not because you're seeking to exploit, but because, like, I can't take care of a family. And then we get deeply disconnecting from the root, and we get to boys being sexually assaulted and stuff like that. Now we already get into cruelty, because basically it's the inversion of the heart. So unfortunately, Mars in Leo opposing Pluto in Aquarius is kind of, Pluto is kind of like the nervous system, and that can be associated with even men raping each other or stuff like that, with Venus there. So the thing is that right now we are experiencing what would it be like to be at perpetual war. And that's the objective of the incest cults and the yin depletion cults, okay? Rosicrucians, Masons, Illuminati, Opte, Vatican, this crown, that crown, wealth families, okay, that cut dividends to the church, this particular wealth families that cut dividends to the church, satanic church or satanic mosque. Did you know there's Muslim Brotherhood of Satan? I did not know that until I was tending to political assassination prevention, and I see symbolism on those who tried to assassinate Geert Wilders, who spoke against the atrocities of Islam. Okay, and any good religion should be able to introspect into, do we need to reform something? Okay, and make it clear, do we need to have another edited version of scriptures? Okay, not to dismiss of what was, just like you still teach Mein Kampf, because you trace of what was back in history, not to burn books, but yes, definitely, think about revision, just like Christianity, just like Judaism. Think about going to, in Israel, attempts to put a king in the sense of David, the kingdom of David. David was a giant rapist. Solomon was worse. That's not up to speed with modern times. Definitely not a country that has a solo goal. And the royal army. Okay, the Mars is already in the sign of Leo. Now you think about Israel that had to battle the British mandate and the election of Mars in Leo, that is, and the kingdom of Jordan, the kingdom of this and the kingdom of that. So you have a royal Mars. But you think about, okay, how does Israel get out of the damn fucking rule? The first thing is not to have an inversion of a king. Okay, not to have a rapist as the idol for a kingdom, right? That is just basis. Um, and secondly, we're at the age of Aquarius, like that's French Revolution times. Okay, and if you bring it to the Middle, if you make a revolution in the Middle East right now, you're expected to have more women rights, more willing consent, more lychee and pineapple. Um, I said what I said. How's she gonna be juicy? Okay, more. And if without willing consent, she's gonna be fungal and bacterial. Okay, you want that in your nervous system? Okay, but you're gonna be slaughtered first. Thinking about sex work. You come to a sex worker. They're all sexpionages. They're child assassins. You come to a sex worker. She's like, yeah, what you like, the this, the that, the that, and then she decapitates you and rapes your body. I don't know. That is a very logical scenario because all espionage is sexpionage, and the point is that those children, they're children, okay? It's not about will be able to slaughter. That's the point. The point, you come to a sex worker, okay, you seduce them with the woman, then she slaughters you. That's it. That's why, and that's why men are afraid of women. They're like, you shouldn't be afraid of a woman when you practice willing consent. That is the role of sex espionage, and I know that because I said no to what I thought was attempts to put me. At first, I said no to what I thought was attempt to my boss trying to hit on me. Very simply put, I said, we're a different generation. You're married. I want out. Okay, I cannot even consider you without having my own autonomy not threatened by this. So I wasn't even like, I had no clue, and I was saying no. Okay, so then I was like, what the fuck is going on? And with the reactions and so on, I was like, okay, that is giving attempts to put a person in prostitution. So here we have shidul, which is trying to coerce somebody to do that, and it's an offense that is 3 years in. And that is the part where his wife liked my posts, where she got it. It was not some sort of like somebody trying to ruin a home or ruin a marriage, but it was like, no, that was me defending my autonomy here. And thinking about structure, okay, thinking about the structure of the workforce and how it needs to be more independent. And indeed, I would open a business later and work for a sex education workshops company. There was an Israeli living in Australia, and it was very difficult to work, but I really believed in the notion of, hey, let's talk about the sex that I do like, because in the generation of Moshe Dayan or later, there's like just a pack of rapists, which then makes it for a pack of impotents, right? So I was like, hey, let's tackle that with what I do want, and do something constructive about it. And then they try to take away at my ability to work and have a business. And then at housing, okay? And so I would later, that continues. And then I understand that that's human trafficking. There's like a human trafficking ring, it's called associated, it's Mason associated. And then I remove assaults. And I'm like, oh, that had to do with them wanting me to be sex espionage at the time that Peter de Vries was running to be a politician. And the desire was not that I would have like affair with him or get information or whatnot, but and he was in open relationship, so that was not like that was not the point. The point was that he would speak later about the WHO, and he was a glitch in the matrix in so many ways. Okay, he tended to crime that nobody tends to. And so even from within his role is going within the cult and being MK and with all these things, he tended to crimes that nobody tended to. Okay, the individual, okay, an immigrant prostitute, he would go for after who murdered her, who this, who that, all the way to Australia and get arrested for trespassing. Okay, so the world is upside down. I'm going, to arrest a criminal, and then they arrested me for trespassing. And it's showing how the corruption goes from is shown by the activity of the police. It was also all the way to his death. Okay, so MK, but it doesn't. I don't see no MKs doing that. That's an MKJFK. Okay, and Procyon. So compatible to talk about JFK. Think about the best way to win a war is to avoid it altogether. Okay, it's not a cowardly statement. JFK was assassinated for that. Peter was assassinated for speaking against the WHO. That makes everyone sexpionage. And what happened? What would be the objective? Is that I would take that man who would speak against making sexpionage viral and murder him. No. Unfortunately, he was assassinated. Was Eden Evolve related to that assassination attempt eventually? Was he one of the people who were trying but not successful? He was definitely one of the people who were trying. Was he also successful, like not with me, but with another person? I don't know. Okay. So you see, respecting my willing consent has so many benefits. It's like you want to do a JFK on your life, accept my willing consent. But you can avoid a world war. And definitely you can avoid being accused of what you actually do. If you did something like that, then disrespecting my willing consent will expose that. That's the thing. It's like, oh, why is my vagina not really smelling the way I want it to smell? Okay, so let's change up the food. Oh, I don't have money for food. Okay, so let's tackle that. Why don't I have money for food? Why can't I just like work, get a job? It's like, oh, what happened when I was trying to work? Oh, I need to rest. Oh, that's legit. I'm not going to go and I will be making mistakes at work if I don't rest, right? Oh, I don't have a housing where I can rest. That's so funny, but that makler is like 40 years, and that was his bill. He let me live in his own housing. I mean, why would he do something like try to put me in human trafficking, cooperate, and ask me for sleeping with my mom? Well, there's drug cartels that are also real estate cartels that are coming to the city. He sold half the city. People do satanic ritual abuse, and he was okay with that. I was like, oh, he made his wealth with something that now gets karma. Oh, maybe the cameras that were in our house when I lived there with my mom in another apartment, and the police that didn't help with anything were associated to the makler. Like that, I never associated that with a makler. Was he cooperating with that? Okay, why was he stalking? Using energy? Like, is his like sexpionage? Like his intelligence. Well, that makes sense. You can't be having real estate without being intelligent. It's like a Mole X or something. Okay, now it gets real. And it cannot be about him being a Moroccan, because I'm the person who's like almost advocating for Tahi, because I can show that what Peter showed, basically, very simply put. Like, there's a reason Boris de Vries did not cut communication altogether with Tahi. He doesn't forgive that. It's horrible betrayal. But he understands that the codes of the crime world and what situation was Tahi being put in, by who. So how is Donovo associated with that? I don't know. Maybe he's invested in that. But I don't know the guy. I mean, I was TA to him. That's it. Okay. I don't know how the fuck is he associated with that. He's kind of like, I don't know, Mossad or something. I have no idea. What's the Mossad with Peter or with Royce? Is it like a fight for who would be the leader or something? I don't know. But Peter spoke against the WHO, so it's kind of like, that's weird. And Royce is kind of like following his father. Maybe not on the WHO, but okay. It is using remote view. Well, Peter R. de Vries Foundation cannot receive tips from remote viewers on cold cases to solve the cases. So what the fuck is going on? And in Israel, we can't have remote viewers contacting the army to locate. We like there are remote viewers that know where the kidnapped at, and that are even channeling to kind of try to assist and send good energy to them. And we still haven't gathered, the Ariel Sharon that instead of Sabra and Shatila will do, instead of a war crime, okay, will do an independent decision to rescue, search and rescue. You don't have to wait for the government. In fact, legally, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to disobey. It's an illegal order not to. When you know the location, and they don't hear the location, they're not agreeing to hear the locations from remote viewers. Remote viewers are used to locate kidnapped and missing people on the regular for years and years and years all over the world. I'm not even talking about Vault 7. I'm not even talking about Starlink, Elon. You have the footage. Elon, you're going to be accused in a war crime, in a crime against humanity. You have the footage. You need to find a way to disobey if something is holding you from disobeying. You put on a yellow ribbon, okay? Free Elon. Okay, you have to disobey legally. You don't want to be put with those, Think about that for Mars, okay? Like this is example. He's now working with Trump. It's like that's a good example of what's going to be on Mars. So, Earth to Elon Musk. The use of Starlink, the use of your technology to create war crimes, to film people against their wish, stuff like that. Like that dumb fucker, this is with the time of the people. I mean, why would a business person have to lose their head over that? Like, So you see how the more that attack, the more the conflict stays, Mars is standing to something, changing it from the core and exposing. Cannot invade without being invaded. Okay, you put in energy. If you try to deplete someone else from the energy, you put in energy. Okay? And if you're trying to be invisible with a very visible Mars, yeah. Again, people try to create injustice. A good time to call on speaker. Yeah, I know why, because the ascendant is right now in Scorpio. We're going to take a photo of that. You see, that's a good teaching. And you see, as I'm teaching you about these curses, these attacks, you see that it's because I'm standing in the way of perpetual war. But it's like, hey, let's have a realistic appraisal. 0 degree, ascendant 0 degree. So it's on my Pluto Sol hour, Sol Antares. We call on Antares, we call on Regulus, we call on Antares, Regulus, to deal with that. It's in my Pluto square. So we see that Pluto, we call on Deneb Algedi, wealth redistribution. So somebody's trying to hoard my equal wealth distribution to cause injustice to my housing situation. Like, y'all won't be lasered. Okay. Where's the laser guy? You see what I'm dealing with in a very literal way? Kela David. Finland bought Kela David. That's a good reminder that housing first is solution for schizophrenia. And of course, it all backfires. Anybody tries to cause injustice to my housing situation, to my wealth, to my oils, to my nervous system. You're going to call on that Pluto talisman as well. To waves upon waves, wash away the dirty plants, and compost them to evergreen forests and healthy, lush nervous system above and below. Okay, bring in the children from the underground, dig in the caves. Misuse of bunkers. Okay, to abolish misuse of bunkers, abolish tyranny. That the win Antares is benevolent victory. You see the ascendant in Scorpio is kind of like an extra Marcy, and now we get an even more extra Marcy time where it's like, okay, that's the time, that's endless war, so everybody participating, anybody who sent any curses and stuff like that, that is an endless war. How does it feel to be in an endless war? Let's contemplate on that. How does it feel to be in an endless war with me? I expose you deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Okay, how does it feel? Is it something that you see yourself living forever? Perpetually? Yeah, let's take a moment to hold the space for that, to contemplate on that. Now we have, with Jupiter in Gemini, the ruler of Antares, we have an applied science. This is the situation of war that is consistent. You know, in Israel, we have been having war for over a year. In Ukraine, over 2 years. Congo, I don't even know. Syria, can't even count anymore. So this is the way it is to be participant in a perpetual war, as well as perpetual spiritual war, religious war. How does it feel? Okay, is that something you want for the rest of your life and next life and next life? The transit of Mars opposing Pluto is going to be with us until April. Do you want to continue to try to perpetuate sexual assaults and deplete your sperm count? Your identity. You're losing your identity, losing your power, losing the mandate of the heaven, okay, because you perpetuated war needlessly. Pluto in Aquarius is 0-degree Aquarius. Such a great time to talk about political persecution and the psychiatric tagging of those who stand outside the margins, okay? What is psychosis? What is psychotic content? Where it's coming from? It's involving the nervous system, right? Oh, trying to create injustice, okay, the dryness in my eyes again. See how I'm sensitive to the nervous system, and I see attempts to try to create injustice when I talk about psychiatry. Why? Well, Pluto is about wealth. Saturn is in Pisces. So is it something to do with the wef and who, the way that they are connected? You see, when a person is raped, man or woman, and they have a reaction to that, and they don't mask. Talk about masking as something people, neurodivergent people or autistic spectrum people have been using, or even ADHD, okay, hyperactive children and stuff like that, have been talking about masking in the age of Capricorn as a need to adapt to society. We are unmasking at this time. Pluto in Aquarius is unmasking. And then it was a mask of the pandemic. So a person is raped and expected to mask. If I think about my muckler, okay, he was masking tremendously. He looks like a business person. I live in his own house that he was living with his family. I didn't even know that. He helped me to bring the things from another apartment that he had if I need something for the new apartment. That's a very good masking, right? Or is it just a part of the real personality, which mostly it is? But there's definitely this masking, and then there is the unmasking that exposes that, hey, that person is doing something not kosher, okay? And there's another facet of the unmasking is like, hey, that is being created by a process of creating sexpionages, that is torture, rape, electrocution. So he was masking fantastically. Then the mask collapsed into a war crime. It is a war crime to do that during war, and a crime against humanity to do that in general, even in times of peace. And a further unmasking is like, hey, how are these criminals created? Because they are created and they serve an agenda of a perpetual war, which acts against him and against his 40 years old business, house, marriage, reputation. Okay. Now, before we psychiatrically tag him as a psychopath or a sociopath, let's bring it to the soil. Is there a situation where his wealth was confiscated by protection, by, did it cause like drug addiction? That would make him even more susceptible. Did he try to retrieve back to his talents or whatever he did in the army, which is intelligence, as a coping mechanism? Okay, was he acting that on the wrong person? Of course. Okay. Now, we can no longer try to make it look like me, the person that exposed that, by just asserting my willing consent and not to be asked questions like if I sleep with my mom when I sign a contract to renew. Okay, I was living 2 years in the property. Okay, and of course freezing and taking a couple of months to even defreeze to get that, because I was like, really like, what the fuck was happening right now? Then to try to psychiatrically tag me or discredit, even if he doesn't remember, which is logical with the MK Ultra, because this is a mind control. So let's say if I have a psychotic contact, where is it coming from? We're going to have ground. We're going to have housing first, independent of my ability to work for an indefinite time and to be believed. So obviously I'm not imagining that supposed psychotic content is an actual reality. Now we're going to have to find more information about the reality. Okay, is it true that he can swear that he didn't say that? Absolutely. This is what they do in MK Ultra. You're making an offense, you're tortured again, or you're having electric shocks again, and or even they touch at your nervous system and they try to make you forget things. Now, of course, if you made such a terrible offense towards a tenant that also risked your reputation, life, marriage, everything, of course you're not, you're even more susceptible to the desire to forget that you did that. Okay. Now we talk about the MK Ultra as a general. So what do we do? There's technology that can diagnose these things, and that's not invasive, and it doesn't put you in more torture. So we're talking about the fact that Pluto is transforming our view on psychiatry. Saturn in Pisces. And we're talking about the attempts to control that. They backfire very malefically because so many people deal with PTSD. They're like, hell, how did it start? Well, there was a war. We had to evacuate. So first we need what? Housing, land, safe condition. You have, and people get claustrophobic and agoraphobic. So you really got to have housing that is on the soil, like in contact with the soil, so to balance the nervous system, to be able to open the door at every hour of the day and night, to be able to walk around freely at every hour of the day and night. That's the housing requirement. Okay, it's for your nervous system. So you'll not be schizophrenic, right? or be considered schizophrenic, right? So the first thing is to understand what is schizophrenia. If the cure is housing first and believing the person, then the antidote is basically it was created in political persecution that had to do with real estate, that touched all the way down to the root of a person being able to have real estate. A home. Now, if you take an inventory of the things that were present, okay, a little bit of holistic health teaching. How did I start this episode? I said, okay, somebody cursed me. It backfired. Now let's open a chart. Let's see what happened here. So if you came, even when you think about horary astrology, or the way I used a version of that with outer planets to tend to missing people and solve cold cases, is the understanding that something is a nervous system. And if that thing comes up right now, whether you're a psychologist, astrologer, or whether you are a person that sees the person as a holistic healer, he's like, okay, that thing is coming up now. When did it start? What happened? Okay, or that thing is coming up right now. Let's take a look at the signs and symbols that we have in the room at the time that we're speaking. For example, right now, the word human trafficker. The fact that human traffickers are also using that to locate people, the way that I'm using that to curate, human traffickers are using that, okay? They were using the fact that Mars was alone with Pluto. It's like, Mars is alone with Pluto, let's try and attack now, okay? So those things are used also as windows for attempts on kidnapping, on assaulting, on casting a curse, okay? Human traffickers use that as well as we use that to curate. So you see, channeling, or people were shocked right now that they are like, oh, human trafficker, tree, as I say that. Now, the power of tree, okay, the power of tree is used both by the supposed intelligence for the inversion of the power tree, or simply the power of tree as something that you repetitively do 3 times over, and that has, like an incantation. So they were probably using the power of tree, and that can be, okay, flipped back. So the power of tree, okay, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. No weapon formed against me shall prosper, okay? That's one way you can use an incantation. And you use the power of tree. You're using Mars, whereas Mars, Leo, what's fixed star, we have Regulus, so it's coming from royal bloodline, royal army, so royal army commanders, or those who work for them. It comes from your Pluto is in Aquarius. You talk about Deneb Algedy. You talk about people that want to redistribute wealth, but not equally. Okay. And so think about the inversion on Deneb Algedy. Think about Mark Rutte has a son on Deneb Algedy. Okay. There would be a lot of attempts to get him to do an inversion of Deneb Algedy. Okay, but that would necessitate that he works against himself. And that means he would be sacrificed. So this reminding us, for example, that he won't be vouching for war crimes or wars against women. Okay, he can call on Deneb Algedy, for example, to tend to that, to take back his, I'm not saying take back power, he's in power, but to tend to these inversions. Okay, think about how psychiatry is basically, how do you say it? If the cure to schizophrenia is housing first and to believe the patient, then we understand that causing damage to housing causes a person so much damage that it causes them the worst psychiatric disorder. So deprivation of housing with land that you're able to step out day in, day out, all hours of the day, is basically keeping the person from having emergency medical aid, emergency care. Okay, all of our resources when it comes to the mental health need to start with people having a house, that they have a soil and they can walk in and out in every hour of the day and night to ground themselves. You see, if I wake up in the middle of the night and somebody's on Mars hour, let's try to curse this person. Okay, then it backfires. It takes time. We are in 337. Okay, but normally I would need to maybe step on soil, right? And that would mean 337 to go outside, step on soil, take a walk, refresh myself. Okay, let it backfire, go back to sleep. It would need to be a good night's sleep, right? Otherwise, it doesn't mean that I'm psychotic. We got to look at what is going on. What are the corresponding factors? Yeah, oh my God, now dryness in the eyes. Oh my God, people try to make it look like I'm psychotic, that I am not complying with their curses towards me. And they're working against me. And they're targeting me as individual, where that can be technologically proved. Science. People trying to frame me in a way that would make people agree with me not being properly housed, independently of whether I can work right now, whether in the garden or at all. Oh, that's not scientific. The science actually says that the cure for schizophrenia is housing first, independently of ability to work and to be able to walk on the soil all the day, all the night. And you see how embodiment, that is cure for sexual boundary violation, is so important. I wake up, there's dryness in my eyes. I know holistically that is associated with curses, and that's associated with causing injustice to the inner child. So the way sexpionage is created is basically torture, retrieving back to the inner child, and then torturing the inner child, very much like Itamar Yaron, what he did. Okay? And so trying to get me, the child, into the room, so I get a stuffy, get comfortable being my inner child, and then he begins, it's not a try, he begins to assault me. Threaten my life, saying you're not safe here, not safe anywhere. That's MK Ultra, but that was the therapist I went to. And then using the frame that I came to create from trauma to frame me as a psychiatric disorder, so I cannot have my testimony believed, which is the inversion of the cure for psychosis, that is actually to believe the patient. Hey, you're telling me something. For example, a person was telling me, you're sending needles toward me and you're stabbing me. I'm like, okay, what's going on? I said, the feminists, they accuse me of things I didn't do. Okay, I was having feminist rage because I escaped the Me Too. That was a sexpionage, human trafficking, MK Ultra project. And of course, I was enraged. And the person next to me was very sensitive. Sneeze, that's true. And so we gathered that I need to take space from him, because even though I had no intention, I was indeed angry of men in general. And earlier he told me that some girl accused him of something he didn't do, and I internally doubted that, which he felt as needles against him. Okay? he was not being psychotic. He was simply describing his somatic experience. And when we got to the nitty gritty of that, he was kidnapped and was made. There were medical experiences, MK Ultra, by a doctor. So the difference was that at age 6, when I was strolling in a hospital to visit my grandmom, and a doctor took me to like hug me and took me to the side, which today I'm like my entire body recoils against. But back then it was like the weird sensation of a hug and something weird. And then he was already putting a hypnotic command that I would be drawn to that, which took me years to understand. Until listening to Annika Lucas, I didn't understand what's going on. And fortunately, a family member said, immediately came to take me there from there. And the doctor says, I remember this today, why are you interfering? Okay. And they didn't do anything about that later. It was Shiva Hospital. My grandmom was going to have an amputation of her legs, surgery. Um, I was before age 9, either age 9 or before age 9, because he still lived in Kfar Saba. And that's the difference, okay, that I was saved and that person next to me was not. Even as I tell this story, it's not the first time I tell this story, the dots begin to connect in a way that they didn't before. Because, like, yes, that's MK Ultra. He was MK Ultra. I didn't even connect that. It's secondary trauma, because when you're exposed to a story, you don't even connect the dots, even when there's something that happened to somebody else. Um, So you see the way that psychiatry would tag these people, we would have the inversion on the sciences and the inversion on the medicine. That's why you're getting torture for treatment of cancer. There are treatments for cancer, abundance of treatments for cancer. You're getting the worst ones, even when they do market some pills. And this is why for psychiatric crisis, you would get beta blockers that best imitate the body being traumatized. That's an inversion on medicine. That's the pyramidal and extra pyramidal. That's the what Peter said. The word is upside down. Okay, and then he said that somebody should be strapped, and they're like, I talked about this Mercury retrograde, that somebody could come up with something like that. Okay, that's of course the inversion. Um, or I remember I was joking. If take it back to me, because that's like not about somebody else. But I was joking for when Itamar, the psychologist, okay, stole my glass dildo. So I was joking on Facebook, and I'm saying, I'm the person that if is raising awareness to not use the psychiatric tagging against people who went through violence, and that schizophrenia is cured by housing first and believe in the patient. So the schizophrenia is the psychotic thingy, okay? And so, but then I have to admit that my psychologist is like completely bonkers. Okay. Probably he needs housing first, independently of ability to work for a while. Maybe an open air prison. Okay, we can go in and out and reconnect with the soil and balance his nervous system, but definitely not in a situation where it would harm like patients. And definitely not to use psychiatric tagging or sexual harassment. He's used the sexual harassment against a mother of 6, according to her testimony. And I have to admit that I believe her. Okay. I guess he was boggled by the fact that she had sex 6 times, at least 6 times in her life to bring children. Okay. Whether it was rape or sex, I don't know, because I don't know what she's been through. But goes back to the Madonna horse symptoms. I mean, like, and he wrote that in the opinion, do you have a professional opinion? Because it's a diagnosis of her ability to be a parent. Okay, I don't know. I mean, you could say that that person is, if you sexually harass a woman, okay, I would take the children from you on that. But when you think about what I have been through, I would say that if there is a functioning matter, leave her there. If not, we are in a problem, because it's not like the welfare would do a better job. They're actually waiting for something like that to explode so that they can take the kids. And the kids would be traded, which I'm against. We also don't want them to be traded or to be molested by their dad, or to have to go into child state and be turned into sexpionages by their dad. Okay, so Houston, we have a problem. And this is where you get the masking and unmasking that comes with Pluto in Aquarius and Saturn in Pisces. Ida does not have children, as much as I know. Still, he did not have children. I am not a mother. But a child psychologist is the father of at least one child. That's okay. That's tremendous trauma to the children anyway. Like whatever happens with that, that's tremendous trauma to the children anyway. To stay with such a father, tremendous trauma. Do not stay with such a father, tremendous trauma. Definitely not to be taken by welfare. That's kidnapping into sex trafficking. You know. And we don't know the mom. Is she also incapable of child? We don't know. What about his patients? Well, that's an all. If you think about his patients, that's a global government situation. Is a lapsus. Okay. If you think about his own children, it's also a global government situation, because there's nobody that there is not the inversion of care for the children. This calls work on the inversion of birthing, the inversion of care, the inversion of sex. Okay, rape is the inversion of sex. To control fertility. That's why we have so many STDs running around. So you see that Mars-Pluto opposition, the connection between heart health, blood flow, bloodline, royal family crown, and what we consider a scientific revolution, global government, but also science itself. And then I'll get you talking about wealth redistribution and truth and protecting the truth, protecting the patent makers, protecting the I'm talking about the people who are coming with the innovation, protecting the scientific evolution. And it's an evolution with Pluto rather than a revolution. Science evolved, the scientific endeavor involves um, growing and deepening our authenticity as to our experience. What do we think is science? Okay, because I can think of it. Oh my God, psychiatry is such an interesting, exotic thing to explore as a medical condition. It's like, well, that's the person being unhoused and politically persecuted. That usually entails raping them and electrocuting them. They need housing. They need to be believed. They need to step on the soil, and they need to be have everything in their own time for quite some decades. That's secure. So think about the psychiatric tagging in the psychiatric institution. Somebody has been decomposed because what you're being told is a public worker that you cannot act against. Doing something is a kidnapping, which is a crime against humanity, and you can resist by any means necessary. So just knowing consciousness, this is a kidnapping attempt. Nobody has the right to force it. And if you are given an ultimatum that you can only be supported at hospital and have some yoga classes and have some, in the better hospitals, if you take the pills that perpetuate the trauma, the somatic experience and psychological experience of being sex trafficked. Or you stay to the street and then you'll be sex trafficked. That is a crime against humanity that's punishable by death. Okay? Know your rights. The soft skull principle, okay, it is willing consent, informed consent. You will say you can't consent, and they can't do anything to you. Person going crazy, running amok. Well, where is the forest that they can go and crazy and run amok in? And they can release that energy to the forest and come back exhausted and have a good night's sleep. And then be believed when they begin to speak, and then have a place that they can stay that's safe for them. That means an open space that they can walk in and out to antidote the claustrophobia, to actually curate trauma. Not limit their movement, not creating an even more giant monster that would later destroy for entire humanity, going extinct. An environment that is the hospitalization environment is the jail experiment, right? That was what was done to our leaders. Okay, they grew up in satanic ritual abuse, and there's the jail experiment. It's like, what would people do to people? Is a part of that. It's not only does we more, but that's what they're doing in the world right now, right? How do you have a successful jail experiment? Well, you explode the fucking jail out. Okay, the rebellion of the ghettos was a good ending to jail experiment. Okay, they rebelled. The jail. So if you're busy in torturing one another and deriving pleasure from that, you're in jail. You're gonna be in jail for a very long time. See, now with this Mars Pluto opposition, we really get, and Sol hour with Antares, we contemplate on the situation of having to perpetually win all the time. Like, can't we just, relax, have a cup of coffee, and not have to worry about how the coffee was made? And I'm not talking about the fact that the best coffee in the world is made through the digestive system of animals. I don't remember which animals, or like the best coffee in the world, thinking about Pluto, is the coffee that some animal pooped. That's okay. You don't have to worry too much about that. If the soil is clean and everything's good, that poop is actually okay. That is absolutely gorgeous. The most expensive coffee brew that you will have. I never tried it because I never had the privilege to travel safely as a woman and drink a cup of coffee with an indigenous tribe, not being worried about, you know, whether they'll cannibalize me on the airport on the way back home. I am half Dutch. Where is Hannibal procedure in Israel? Never mind. So I never thought that I would have to worry about the men telling me that they want to eat me, and I'll have to think about anything other than having lots of pineapple and lychee before we meet. Okay. The crown is Corona. Approved by Dutch official government. They call it Corona for a reason. Where at the times that Corona was a beer, right? And Corona is a Danish currency. I think also Norwegian krone. I don't know, currency. Um, the all NAT members now, no? The all NAVO. I said what I said, don't curse me back, guys. So now we're getting that, you know, instead of drinking coffee, that is, by the way, is best brewed by being pooped. We are in this perpetual war state, and that's a good time to contemplate whether we like it or not. Is it something that we would want to continue after Mars releases from Pluto? Would we want that timeline back? Now, what happens when you try to put that timeline on somebody and they're like, no thanks, but no thanks? Yes, still. So our coming of Venus, you see, Sol Antares is such a contemplative agent that illuminates on the nature of perpetual war. And it gives us time to understand what are the implications, how we have been facing with an inversion of a war. Because war, you studied, and I actually studied international relations, and in politics and governance. And the teaching is a war is the state of negotiations continuing by other means. An objective of a war is to get back to the negotiation table as soon as possible. Another thing that Mars represents is law. And on the Supreme Court of Netherlands, um, there is a Latin version which translates to where the judiciary decision fails, armed conflict ensues. And so you think about how important it is to not have the inversion of war and the inversion of the judiciary system. Okay. And while people pick their battles, it seems like everybody has to pick the bigger battle, because if you went through trauma, you were evacuated, and you seek mental health help, and it's like, oh, not enough doctors, not enough this, not enough hospitals, not enough that, not enough housing, not enough soil. Okay. Or if you run into people and you're used to a certain standard of behavior and culture, and they're hyper vigilant, this is what it calls when a person is having traumatic experience. It's called hypervigilance, because they understand that what they didn't pay attention to when it was small became very big. So let's say you had a housing situation where somebody tried to put you in human trafficking. It's not about, oh, let's just find another flat, because maybe you tried that before. It's about, let's create a situation where I don't have to worry about this problem ever when coming to have a housing. Or maybe there's an omen that I need to have my own estate and my own ground, and be able to walk day in the day and in the night peacefully. So I'm a better person. I take my anger or rage out constructively on creating something in the soil, tending to the garden, jogging, okay, taking a jog so I don't explode on people. Then I'm a well-behaved person. I'm a very humble, and when you had a good workout, then people after workout are not the same as before workout. Okay, you're invigorated, you're rejuvenated, your muscles are renewing. You have your protein shake or whatever you do there, um, and you take a shower. You basically you go to sleep. You go to rest for a while. Okay, and then you're meeting someone. You look very attractive, you look calm, you have energy, you're calm, you're nice to be around. So what happens with people that don't have the ability to do that on their own soil? Okay, they try to go to a gym, then it gets sexually harassed, and you talk about the space in the gym. It's like, why don't we have the ability to jog, okay, on the soil, even in the winter? Why is no family sauna? Okay, those things. To go to Finland, sauna culture is about your health. Okay, it's not a luxury treatment. It's basic need to balance the nervous system to deal with the changing temperatures. If your housing does not have a sauna, you will be more susceptible to get ill in the winter, get wind diseases and cold diseases, which basically mean you're going to have fever. What we think of as luxury, because we grew up in a society where that seems like a privilege, is basic human needs. So you think about the inversion of a medical field is when a person is not feeling well, to put them in a place with many other people that don't feel well and have a nervous system of dumb fuckery. And concentrated all these people, especially when they have a place where you can burn the bodies later. A hospital is a version of a concentration camp, diluted. Now, it's important to have a place where somebody needs a surgery or something like that, that it's hygienic and so on. It's important. But it doesn't have to be an industrial enterprise to get people to go to that situation. We do need to allocate resources to rare cases that, yes, maybe we have to have enough for getting to budget ourselves for rare cases. So they don't have to become a pandemic. And we think about the way that people, veterans and people that were going through sexual violence, that they would be considered the feminine, especially if they were women, so it's like the feminine of the feminine. Think about the way that they were mistreated in society and think about what happens in a world war. It becomes a pandemic. Now everybody knows what is claustrophobia. You know how many posts I saw on Facebook on claustrophobia? We even had that in a satire. I have a parent that had been dealing with claustrophobia for years, and when they gathered the strength to ask for help for because they could not work in any place, and as things were getting more industrial complex, that was challenging for them. I was born because they could give birth in a hospital that was one story, and my father saw the view from outside. Okay, that was the conditions for my birth. Um, Here were also the conditions. My father didn't understand why the mother was screaming. It's like that's something that needs to be allowed. Um, okay, but that is nobody had the notion of like orgasmic birth and stuff like that. So, and it's way more challenging to consider, the lineages and so on. Um, but you think about people don't have these conditions for birthing. That's an inversion of fertility. And when my parents asked for help regarding claustrophobia, because the cure for claustrophobia is about an open space, it's not about prolonged exposure, as people tend to think. That's an inversion of cure. It's creating space even within a closed space. It's adjusting the space, not adjusting the person. It's a nervous system. Okay, the nervous system says, hey, we need more space. It's being accommodated. The more they are accommodated, then the more they can delve into um, other divergent of spaces. But hey, spaces should not be incompatible. Spaces should not be a jail. Okay, that structure. That's the cure for claustrophobia. Because you cannot prescribe a pill for that, the psychiatrist in the diagnostics wrote kleptomania. And of course, they did not receive any help and any funding. So now we have a world war, and many people are claustrophobic. And now they have a name for that. You can't live in a 30-minute city with a skyscraper, as beautiful skyscraper can be, just like a penthouse or something, being claustrophobic. If you can't travel a lift, elevator, you can't go on a bus or on a train. The plane, if you go on a plane, for some people they can't go on a plane, you have to travel by sea. When I was traveling with my parents, we were traveling on the deck, on a ferry. Okay, we had the deck, and only for me later took a room, but then it was getting risky for me to be like alone in the room, so we had the deck. She was sleeping with sleeping bags on the deck, and then coming inside, it was a storm. Not something you can do in the Arctics. Okay, in the Middle East you can. Or if we had to, like in a ferry that you needed a room, then it had to be very close to the deck, okay? You can't stand in line. Okay, they're very, you think about claustrophobia as a disease. It is you consider it as a disease, but it's basically a calling to restore peace. The nervous system in Korea, I learned that there's something called forest bathing or nature bathing. And this is how you balance your nervous system. Okay, to get a very angry person, tell them to take a walk in the forest. We love you. Take a walk in the forest, please. Have this conversation after you had a walk in the forest. Talk to the trees a little bit, not as a punishment. Go do something that care takes for your nervous system. Reconnect with the nervous system that is happy, thriving, lifeful, balanced, joyous, lush. And then we can have a conversation. Now, if you ain't got the forest next to you, because you live in a desert, okay, then take a walk, scream to the mountains. Now, if you ain't got the mountains next to you, then how are you going to release the vocal cords? Dance around. Well, if it bothers the neighbors, you need to change up the architecture. Otherwise, you will have crime. And you cannot litigate for this crime without changing up the space, right? But you also can't continue the crime. So a change of the space must ensue, right? Otherwise, the entire city is lasered, and it's very reasonable. I remember when we were traveling through Switzerland, we were going to Passo San Gottardo, and in the beginning there was lovely and nice, and then we were hearing shootings all around, and it was not the army. I was like, what's going on in Switzerland? Well, they have bunkers where they sit on, basically in being invested in enslaving humanity. And now it gets to the serene mountains of Passo San Gottardo that you can freaking drive a car without somebody that might be shooting, and one bullet I think it's like a gummy bullets, and they were hitting even the windows. Like, it was not the army. I was like, what the fuck has happened to Switzerland? Why is it not peaceful? Well, if they are invested in that eventually that comes home. Think about the entire world being invested in oil and gas and pharmaceutics, okay? Pharmaceuticals. Now, there's nothing wrong with being able to protect yourself, but when that's in the inversion of medicine, the inversion of weapon industry, with all that entails, okay? You think failed army. Elon Musk offered to replace the F-35 with, I mean, I don't know if that's the inversion of war or not. It can be not. It can be yes. I don't know. Maybe it's more economic. Maybe it's not. In the north, we had several cases of a tiny bomb plane strolling around for an hour, 2 hours, unbothered. And they knew about it. It's not like nobody noticed that. When they noticed that, since they noticed, oh, the hour, 2 hours, like, really? We have Mercury on Aldebaran, mind you. But it's very comfortable to keep people inside for a whole day. It's like, hey, there's this tiny plane outside. Well, your chances of getting hit by that are, way worse than your chances of getting hit by a car. But everybody stays in because that's an unusual thing happening. And they stay in for hours. It's like this tiny plane with a bomb in the sky. And people are staying locked in. Like, they don't even need to see a pandemic now. Well, that same North did not accommodate for homeless people. If you were homeless, the police would tell you, you don't want our solutions. That would be hospitalization. But also the social worker would tell you, I don't have a 5-star hotel for you. Well, guess what? 7 October, Pakal. All Israel was evacuated to the Dead Sea 5-star hotels along the shore in front of bordering Jordan. That was not a vacay experience, but they did have a 5-star hotel. So we have accommodation for people. Okay? When refugees came to Netherlands and got housing before the residents, there was housing for them. And very immediately. So what housing crisis? There are houses. There was just a plan to replace population. But other than that, there are houses. Now you can say good thing, bad thing, who knows, because you can consider that as good wealth redistribution when a refugee from, let's say, Palestine gets an apartment in Old Amsterdam. Okay. And you can say, okay, that's good. But then what the question is, do people wake up to what's happening? Because if we want to tend to that, it's like, well, why would the person come all the way from, like, Africa to Netherlands to be housed, to be working in a farm, working very hard. Was it that much more terrible in Africa? Why? Don't they have the soil? I mean, you listen to the people in the shorts and they're like, their soil's not polluted. They can use the cow dung, okay, the cow poop on the plate because it's antiseptic, and they can cut fruits on that plate, okay? And it's not disgusting because the soil is so clean, the food is so clean that the cow poop is just antiseptic. That's why the best coffee in the world is brewed by the digestive system. I don't remember what animal, okay? Um, so why do they have to get out of this country? I mean, for traveling, yes, for business makes sense, but to travel to make money for the family and work so hard. So if you're homeless, you get in housing first, which is good. But then you ask yourself, what is going on here? And we can't talk about their culture without asking ourselves, well, what about ours? Okay. And that is the question of deportation. There was a case for a Moroccan child that was to be deported, I think, with his mom. And the mom did not know what to do and so on. And Peter's son was actually advocating for them. I don't know if he was like taking it as a case, or he was just speaking in their favor, because Peter used to speak in favor of the Americans, and then that's continued. But there was also the question of like, hey, is that son safer in Netherlands where he could be turned into sexpionage? Is that child actually could be kidnapped by the welfare? Like, is Netherlands a safe place for a child in general, Moroccan or not? Would he be safer in Morocco? Okay, when I eventually, after the winter shelters ended, returned to Israel, there was this question of like, hey, there could be again the risk of human trafficking here. So it goes back to being not better than Israel. And if I don't have housing, independent of ability to work because I went through intense trauma, then let's try Israel. And then I rented the place, and the place they tried to put in human trafficking again. That's the meaning of the question, do you sleep with your mom? You try to put me and my family in trafficking. That's the question. Okay, it's not a sexual harassment. That's the MK Ultra agenda. So where do they money launder? Do they money launder on the oils, on the gas, on your expect your investment to not yield because you're invested in compound interest of human trafficking. This is why to receive welfare is more economic and ecosystemic than to try to get out and make a living, because then I would pay taxes even more to a system that money launders these taxes with human trafficking, compounded, and then puts it back into the oil. That I would see it as investing in something that has yield that can stand the test of inflation. It's not your oils and gases that stand the test of inflation, it's the human trafficking and sexpionage. And of course, that doesn't stand the test of inflation. So don't expect that the businesses that they money launder it in to not bubble pop. You think about emotional eating, okay? If all your food is GMO, you think I need so much food to be satiated. But if you're eating good food and you're all in all good, okay, you don't need all that much. So we don't even have in touch realistic appraisal of what our needs are and what and how to budget for them. And the money compounds using human trafficking. So the fact that I take from that, that I receive outcarrying or receive, I don't receive outcarrying, receive welfare in Israel, is basically mean that I'm less of a participant in contributing to that industry. And when I tend to how that money compounds, so it's not like I go get a job, I understand what that entails, and I tend to changing that so that I can get out of welfare situation, and I need to have a realistic appraisal of what does it mean to be on my feet, okay, or okay, that means my housing can't be confiscated. That means that whether I have the ability to defend myself or not, I should be at ease. And it's not an internal at peace with everything. Gaslighting is inversion on spirituality, gratitude, and anything Jupiterian. The consciousness, okay, staying in that consciousness. I said, no, I do not consent. There's no shaming a person into, no, that's no, there is no excuse to that. No notion of karma supports a person being raped, child being molested, person being tortured today. In fact, most people, when they hear about child labor or hoard things, they're like, they feel helpless because they don't know what to do about the situation, not because they don't care. The human resources, and that's secondary trauma. And that's where I say begin to tend to yourself and begin to better source everything as far as you can. Then more solution. You basically need to tend to your own trauma at first so that you can hold more and more space. You even listen to testimonials of people who survived. It's difficult for them to bring in a testimony, but to listen to that, you have to self-care, because you hear about, yes, all triggers apply, children, living children that are buried with dead children and smelling the rot of the body as a ritual, and then you don't know if you're ever coming out or not, and then they put you in a hospital. Which is also an inversion upon ritual. And then the fact most of the world doesn't know about that, doesn't understand what it is, and doesn't know what the people need, and how that entails to almost every action that we make. Every business transaction has tax, that's VAT. And at the same time, when you recover from these things, you need housing independent of ability to work for very prolonged time and to be believed, not to be forced to speak. And you have an inversion on being active about the situation that puts people into slavery. She was still in Mars hour, now it's Venus. Already 24 degrees Capricorn, coming to close the cycle with Pluto, which Mars opposes. And we understand that the compound interest of enslaving that which is the feminine, whether it's the soil or the people. If I think about the half moons that I build in the soil, it's a very natural way for regenerating nature and just allowing it to be, which both doesn't require me to water it all the time and allows me to be at peace, not because somebody else is doing the job for me, but because I hold the space for that forest to grow, and it just grows. That's restoring peace. And as I speak, people in the neighborhood are fighting. So now the entire world is dealing with those inversions. And so there is massive global reaction to these inversions. People en masse with every culture have their own different experiences, but also thoughts about this. If you asked a woman in Uganda, what do you do for a living? She said, I glow. And suddenly she has to do MK Ultra hand gestures. That woman still steps on fertile soil and has a chance to balance her nervous system. And she raises awareness to women's rights. Okay. Which is the right thing to do. She raises awareness to women's rights in Africa, which is an important issue to tackle, or domestic issues, because that tackling that can avoid further complications like colonialism. Okay. Whereas not tackling that and leaving that to be pandemifies the problem. For men. I think about even the jokes on Islam, but everybody says it's racist, it's this, it's that. It's denoting of something that takes place in another culture, because you can't really talk about your own in a way that, hey, if Islam abolishes that, Islam now has to be thinking about the Muhammad waiting for 6 years old Aisha to turn 9. That's so Mormon, right? And the red blood on the white sheets of the Jews comes out again. It's like, how can you tell us that this is in any way divine or serving a divine purpose? Okay? It's not anti-Semitic to say that. It's not anti-Islamic to talk about what the fuck is this waiting for 6 years old Aisha to turn 9. It's not blasphemy to say there's nothing yet Christ-like about Mormon marriage, which is child marriage, happening in the United States as we speak. A Malawi chief, dark-skinned woman, abolished child weddings and sent the girls back to school just recently. Talking about advanced culture. That's peace restored. When Taylor Swift was talking about sexual harassment, she was one of the first that won a case. It wasn't until Jaguar Wright exposed the black music industry and the first that were exposed were, the Diddler, and then the Beyonce, and I believe Jack, right? She was assaulted by Jay-Z. It's first-hand testimonial. And we know that the cure for schizophrenia is housing first, independently of ability to work, and to believe the patient. Okay, so scientifically, she's not imagining. And that happened, okay, every black woman speaking about the industry for years and years and years until it got to the feet of other people, and it was white people who believed her first. Why? Because it's a different culture. Is it something that doesn't happen in white music industry? Okay, of course it does. Okay, white people are not so comfortable talking about that, but it's not because of the color. I remember when I was in Israel, I was talking about it was just Lehava Ilgun, that they were breaking up marriages between Muslims and Jews because there were a lot of exploitations. Okay, there was a lot of trafficking the brides, very simply put. And then I hear both from Moroccan people that did that on purpose to Ashkenazi women, and I'm like, how do you expect to bridge racism when that's how you act towards the women? It's like you're meeting a woman from your culture. Now you're taking your anger, your rage at her. What's the family going to think about Moroccans? It's going to think, is that how Moroccans do in their culture? But what you don't see is that that woman escaped to you because she thought it would be less of a psychologically abusive and cold environment for her as maybe a home. So if you both exchange ideas on how to abuse women, but don't you think that we're going to see that you're in some kind of a dumbfuckery cult and we're going to go against the cult? that's the issue of the marginalized in society. If you marginalize, let's say, women, what are you going to do? Same if you marginalize men, okay? But then it's the question of the prison cell experiment. Are we going to rebel and break down the prison, or are people going to get caught up in the division and so on? Now, if a person's dealing with a situation, a woman has to protect herself from a downfucker human trafficker. So we're going to do whatever she has to do, and that means slaughter, expose their cover business, tend to all the real estate agents in the area saying, hey, I want to buy a house here, but I see that the place is not safe for women because that person is also a muckler, is doing stalkings on his tenants. You're just going to have to do whatever she has to do. And unfortunately for her, most things it would come down to is like, hey, there's another crime family over there that are the enemy of that crime family. She's going to go, well, if you treat me well, I'm going to be fending for you for now because that person mistreated me. Well, if you think about, why did I pay attention to, let's say, Mokro Mafia Taki, okay? Because I know that there's a code that I saw he was looking for representing himself because he didn't find a lawyer office that's not affiliated with fending for sex offenders. I'm like, oh, wait. That tells me that all these Dutchy lawyers, all the Dutchy lawyers, not just the family that there was the betrayal experience, which is the Fries family, okay, which didn't contact with him. Like, let's make it clear, okay, it was terrible betrayal and not completely like cutting contact. It was the person, the Kali Kasam in the company that was in contact with Tahi, and that was not something that it's a horrible betrayal. It's not something you can forgive, of course, but it's also not taking it back to now being against Moroccans or playing to the division. But at the same time, I look at this person. It's like, what are the drugs that he deals with? It's MDMA and it's amphetamines. MDMA is used to curate from sexual trauma and war trauma. It's a psychedelic love buffer experience. Amphetamines are used to function in your day-to-day life after being assaulted, unfortunately. Throughout my second degree, I began to take amphetamines. Later, I learned aromatherapy and I switched, but that was prescribed for me. What if you don't have a prescription? And so he didn't find in the entire country a contour that doesn't represent sex offenders, because representing sex assault victims would work for him, not against him, in jail. And he knows that. He didn't find that means that there is no representation in the kingdom of Orange for victims of sexual boundary violation, be it boys, girls, women, men, no one, two genders, gender non-conforming, no one represents you if being sexually assaulted in the kingdom of Netherlands. Tahi exposed that. Now he's sitting pretty in Dubai, and it was like, how can he get away with da 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 da? We have his car, we have his this, we have it. You're not Peter. Then to the fact that the crown witness was the witness of the crown. He had family, but then to the fact that the crown witness was the witness of the crown. Tachi found nobody to represent him that doesn't represent the sex offenders. Naturally, there's a bit of a conflict of interest with the Friesen, Bagnet, and Kassem. Okay? You're not Peter. You want to fly to Dubai because you want to traffic some children there? How about the fact that there is no lawyer's office in entire kingdom of Orange, and Tachi looked because he needed representation before he was flying to Dubai for sex crimes victims. No lawyer office. Okay? That's a conflict of interest. Structural. The devil ain't had a jurisdiction like this. Don't talk to me about the car plate of Tachi in Dubai. You're not Peter. You wanted to keep Peter alive. Well, you should have done that when he spoke against the WHO, because there was no beef with Tachi. He murdered some people, should have gone to jail. Okay, fine. Well, let's talk about the WHO. That's Demick. That's Supreme Court judges that replaced Demick. That's the crown. That's the WEF. That's the WHO. That's the Royal Army. How about the alliance, which come from the States, not OTAN? Okay. No, but let's talk about the drug dealer sitting in Dubai and somebody wanted to go all the way from the Netherlands instead of like representing sex trafficking victims in Netherlands. Hans Semendma. He had a wife, okay? Open dialogue, believing the patient. If we had housing for all these refugees, we have houses. There's no housing crisis in the Netherlands. There's no housing crisis. There's housing for every person in the Netherlands. We have for the refugees. They got housing. Okay, people are sitting the shelter with from Europe, not from Europe, okay? Because from Europe they had another shelter. It was a mock. They all got housing very well, fantastic. Kirchstadt in the street. The movie means we have housing. We have no housing crisis. There's no housing crisis in the Netherlands. It's a small country, but it has enough housing for everybody. There was nobody to fend for anybody that was sex trafficked in the Netherlands ever, because it's for sexpionage. So structurally, there's no justice for sex offenses in the Netherlands. And remember what is inscribed on the Supreme Court in Latin, okay, where the judiciary decision fails, armed conflict ensues. How about that and the fact that we are in World War III? And naval leader telling us they're not going to vouch for your war crimes, for your grapes, for your... Because he ain't dumb. He knows the system is this one person that has been operating from within the nervous system, not going to vouch for that Adam Fugri. Nobody's going to vouch for that Adam Fugri. You won't see it on RTL. On RTL, they'll be speaking about it. That's this talking in Dubai. They're still talking about Ali B. Okay, all these things coming with the retrograde. So Moroccan singer sexually harassing girls. Lovely. Who represents the girls? There's no lawyer office in Netherlands that represents sex offenders alone, and that's a conflict of interest. We know that because Tachi. That's more important than Tachi sitting in Dubai or Ali B. So I think Khalid Qassem, that was in contact with Tachi, he was accused for bribing he was accused of bribing somebody to get justice in Netherlands. So if you don't have anybody to represent sex offenses victims, then how do you get justice done? Well, you tip some 50 grams of white on the scales, and then you balance the scales. Peter saw that, okay, but you see, everybody does that. then you're like, okay, everybody does that, and it's a sort of a different way. Think about a Martian party, a different way of balancing the scale. So like on the scale, 50 grams of white for, let's say, somebody that needs justice is a small price to pay. You think about the whole holistic picture of justice, right? Now, let's say a woman or a man is a victim of sex crime, okay? You either got to get it through the taxation or they got to be a drug dealer, because like if you're a drug dealer, you can tip the scale. They get justice. You might even get compensation. They can help you to buy some 50 grams, a couple of pounds of grams of white, so that when justice procedure is something that you need to do, you can tip the scale. Then you get women drug dealers. And if you think about the fact that the medicine is an inversion of the medicine, so sometimes, like in Israel, for example, we had legalization of weed for medical uses. People had to buy in Herzl's way more, which is the drug dealers. I was surrounded with people with trauma, and they were, I don't like the weed. I'm half Dutch, but I don't like the weed. And I could get it medical, but I don't like the weed. And God give nuts, I know. And so what happens is that people had to go to the drug dealer because the quality of the drugs at the drug dealer was higher and good quality, whereas the quality that the state was providing was not enough. And when you have a person dealing with tremendous pain from chemotherapy or fibromyalgia, which is the nervous system, with the fact that the trauma affects the nervous system, causes inflammation, and then people have trauma, which is another reason we need to assert our boundaries and we need space, okay? And you can't move anything. And now, you know, we're going to have the fire air, so we're going to be tending to fibromyalgia as trauma response way more. Body mind is something we know. Okay, fibromyalgia is associated with trauma. And so What are anti-inflammatory? There's anti-inflammatory food, that's fishes and greens, nuts and seeds. Okay, going nuts is wonderful. Itamar was trying to go into my dream, and I saw like a tree and then an envelope with a nut. It was like going nuts. I had to go and I said, try to inflict, like, to show me as going nuts. It was like, try to make me crazy. And I'm like, I can understand why you are going crazy. But you know what? I definitely need to eat more nuts. It's not the nuts that you want me to eat. It's the actual nuts that grow in trees. They are good for the nervous system. So when people want you to eat their nuts for money or enslavement, you cut their nuts, then you put it to the soil that nourishes the tree, and there's nuts growing from the trees. Those nuts, some of them are brain shaped and is very good for the brain. Think about, and they're packed with vitamins and nutrients that are excellent. So you gotta go nuts, okay? And everybody that wants you to present you as a person that's going nuts for not going on their nuts. It's like, hey, you never practice will and consent consistently enough for me to desire to do so. But you know what? Now that you remind me, I definitely need to eat nuts from trees, nuts and seeds from trees. That's very good for the nervous system, so that I don't have to punch you to death to get rid of the energy, so I don't get fibromyalgia from the post-trauma of your insinuating that I should be doing something sexually that I don't desire to do. But speaking about the nut tree, if you want to be hanged from a nut tree over the crimes against humanity that you do, that's taken into account if that would sweeten your verdict, and I will take that into consideration. Going back to Tachi, so you see that the drug dealers sometimes provide for the drugs that you actually need to curate from sexual trauma or from sex trafficking, like MDMA, which is a love buffer. And in that love buffer, if you go back to Terence McKenna, who eventually was deceased from a brain thing from all the drugs he did, very likely, but on a dosage level, he definitely looked into psychedelic drugs. You think about the MDMA as something that facilitates something that's closer to a near-death experience. I never tried that, and it's a love buffer, so you're more inclined to love yourself and honor yourself and reconnect with your sensuality. Now, you don't want to do it in a space where you would be molesting children around. I guess get people more, so that you don't want to abuse that. But you think about the fact that if the medical world is an inversion of medicine, then sometimes you would find the actual cure at the drug dealer. It's not for nothing that Israel is called an Herzls. Herzl is the okay. So and after legalization, it was contributing to drug dealers because people needed the actual good quality stuff, and there would always be that person, that veteran, that would say, "Hey, I know somebody that knows somebody. There's a Herzl down the street that sells something that's actually good." So, so you think about those 50 grams tipping the scale, it gets a holistic, different perspective. Are you going from, let's say, being a true crime investigator journalist, and you see that it's like, hi, why are you doing that and that, and exposing that? They're like, hey, maybe I don't get the whole picture here. Everybody's doing that, that's gay. And B, well, where you think like you see all these dead bodies, mutilated, horrid rapes and stuff, like how you're going to regenerate your own well-being? You want to try the psychiatric drugs? That's going to kill you. How about some weed? How about something to take your mind away from that? How about some MDMA session, some psychedelic session? Okay. I do essential oils. I had a lotus. Today I had a wonderful conversation. Ran into a teacher that was teaching children what's this like a GATE program, but the torture was not where she was doing. So she just saw that there was something they were considered a special talent gifted kids. And she asked me if I was one of them with our conversation. I was like, no, my mama never let me go there. And she told me that those children, she said, I felt that there's something different. That like they're very smart, but when it comes to emotional interaction, something's off, and they were operating like children at risk. Okay, and then she began to intuitively understand that. So she didn't have the information I have. I told her about Annika Lucas and survivors and so on. Um, for 17 years, she was working with this crowd, and um, that was a testimony. She understood a lot of what I was talking about and said, I totally get you, but how do we bridge that into society? Because they're going to think you need to take your pills. And I'm like, well, in Hebrew, a pill is a bullet. They said the only bullet that helps against a sexual boundary violation is a 9 millimeters to the head of the offender. Okay? A dead rapist today keeps the doctor away. Then you tell it to a lawyer office that is representing sex offenders. Because you got to make money in the Netherlands. I mean, but we cannot talk about rehabilitation of sex offenders without talking about victims, because the rehabilitation of a sex offender is rehabilitation of the place that they were a victim that was created. And that's the antidote to implication. Okay. And to astral sexual boundary violation cases as well, because for me, knowing that I was targeted to assassinate Peter, and then when Peter was assassinated, there's another generation, right? And it was my insisting on my willing consent and pushing away sex assault. So like, hey, that Christmas, when Royce is doing a film in Christmas in Netherlands. Okay, so me standing up for willing consent is like, hey, that person's going to be targeted at Christmas by a person who's doing remote viewing. What's the antidote? To step on fertile soil. I understand that that creates a satirical situation when I warn, okay, a person who has to represent sex offenders and children, okay, because that's what the code, the MK requires. Okay, then people read less. Of course, when people go to sexual boundary violation, they read less. That's coming up because that's coming up. Okay, because it cannot be that we don't have the ability to be a sexual sovereign in entire kingdom of Orange or Israel, and that's going WHO. That's going out the entire world. Who's gonna read books? Who's gonna watch TV shows? Who's gonna go to the movies? Who's going to relax and enjoy entertainment? Um, and that is a disaster and they're changing the currency with this gigantic global ritual sacrifice to the snake goddess shrines. Okay, but the snake goddess doesn't need that. essentially that's honoring yin and honoring yang, not one over the other. And it's true, same way not in feminism, absolutely. Okay? We have to understand that the tipping of the scale, if there is nobody to represent for victims of sex offenses, that means all these cases are technically won. Okay? I think from soccer we understand what a technical win is. And when it comes to sex offenses, if you won in a sex situation, if you won, you're a rapist, because it's not a win and lose game. Let's talk about the fact that there is an entire Pluto generation, entire Pluto generation. In terms of evolutionary astrology, Pluto evolves from where it's natally at to where it's going. So right now, for example, Pluto is in 0° Aquarius. It is evolving to 0° Leo. Last time it was there, it was Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So are we evolving to another Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Or can we transform where that's going? Okay. And think about this entire, if I think about the decan of will and consent in Taurus, that's the middle decan in Taurus, between 10 to 20 degrees Taurus, the Pluto generation of 10 to 20 degrees Scorpio is several years, okay, that have a Pluto there, that they are evolving to the decan of will and consent. It means they're not there. Evolution happens usually around the Pluto square. For example, in my Pluto square right now, I'm 40. That means I'm beginning to evolve towards, it's having an entire life and it's a conscious working with Pluto. But after the Pluto square, we really learn to work with Pluto way more than in the trine, in the sextile. We begin with that. The square is like where it's at. Now you see me, talking about the political persecution, the roles of psychiatry and that and so on, when Pluto is in 0° Aquarius in my 12th house. Okay, you see me talking about this is doing the Pluto work. They say life begins at 40 for a reason. Okay, I'm doing the Pluto work. And I get that, okay, also on the wealth level, investment level, nervous system level, and make my contribution. Now that's wealth. Pluto is evolving from 0° Scorpio, which is like wanting to know everything about the world holistically, to 0° Taurus, which is growing forests, okay? It is a garden. It is the wealth of Pluto on the land, on a fixed land. So growing an evergreen forest and applying that knowledge to a Venusian lifestyle. It's having enough food, having enough soil, having enough. Okay, and I have Senna there, so it's also curating for trauma of betrayal. Think about the betrayal basically. It's everything that I do. I even pay attention to that. Okay. My son is on the decan of will and consent. So you think about the wealth of knowledge at a service of the entire Taurian signification and evolving into actually having enough. Because when you magically work with the first decan of Taurus, it is about having enough. Okay? It's not about being poor, it's about transforming land that maybe was barren into a fertile, lush forest. Okay, it's not about having poverty, but with Pluto, it's about transforming the wealth of like the places, going to the places where you think there's poverty or not enough soil or something like that, and then with Pluto decomposing the situation and creating fertile soil. It's giant wealth. right? You grow a forest. It's for generations to come. So you think about the middle decan of Taurus, it's giant success. And success has to do with the balance of rest and expansion and contraction, okay, rest and motion, opportunities, and evolving into giant success, shining as you are, and um, and this is the deacon of willing consent. So giant success is coming very literally, and all double entendres intended, upon practicing willing consent. Okay? Evolving there, and it's taking it from the place of, the Scorpio utilizing sexual energy for power, which is Pluto, that's the trauma, evolving into willing consent is giant success on all your endeavors, because you tantrically go about what you desire. And then you understand what you desires you, but not from a rapey situation, because when you go to the essence of desire, you understand that the rejection that you felt was that you weren't in the places where you actually desire. The essence of desire is embodied. It's where you have when you have a good night's sleep, when there's a lush forest in your garden, when you can travel the world, when you have your best brewed coffee, maybe that's poop coffee, maybe that's not, I don't know, okay, when you have your fitness, when if you have everything that you want, what is your essence of desire? What do you desire? Okay, you relax into what you have, right? So it's both a way of going about that and understanding that underneath rejection was that you were not aligned with your desire. And then you don't have to worry so much. If you think about the erectile dysfunction, so other than the weird cold dump fuckery, when people have sex and the other partner is like not completely embodied, not in the experience, or they're like worried or stressed, that tends to drop, okay? Or when people concentrate on giving pleasure to another person so much so that, they forget, like the blood flow is like going elsewhere. But that is showing of how what you thought was a dysfunction or an impotence or what's happening, or is it the age, or I'm too young for that, or whatnot, is actually the result of attuning, and it's not dysfunction, but actually attuning, where you see that you slowly attune, then you don't have to worry about rejection. That's where you have sex. Okay, do you think about how many people running the world right now in their 20s and 30s, they never had sex? Okay, how many people in their 70s and 80s never had sex? They maybe were rubbing genitals, but they never had sex. Okay, and that's the Venusian, is raising the bar. Is raising the bar of success, because you can get it, and it's not about how hard you work, it's the combining of the work and rest that the wins the race. When I say willing consent wins the race, I mean that, because, and I see that in practice. I have a sun in Taurus, because I have Pluto, it's not a place that I'm evolving to, but I'm also am evolving to, because I'm the Pluto Scorpio generation, even though it's not the same deacon. And so when I see that, like, I was like, me tending to willing consent, me forcing that by any means necessary, me exposing things, kind of like, I'm in the midst of quite a story, okay? And I got something to say to everybody because I tend to will and consent. That's success. So you think about success like learning this, learning that, learning that. It's like, attuning to my body and not shaming myself or blaming myself, but out of like what nourishing myself and defending, okay, in the sense that fending for myself, okay, but in the sense that I'm worthy of these things, like that's the natural, and everything goes wrong when that's not working, okay. And everything is wrong when that's not going. It's like not that everything goes wrong, maybe it went wrong. To get it right, you gotta practice willing consent. You gotta bring in those values, and you see that the willing consent wins the race because it's a expansion and contraction. We go into your essence of desire because all that seemed to be rejecting you was actually because you were either not completely there, or you were just practicing, or you were detached from your own self for various reasons, or you were seeking power but not really connecting to your heart, what you actually desire, or all these things. There's all that. It's very cliche to say all rejection was imaginary, because grief and loss is not imaginary, and feeling that and the evolution path is evolution for a reason. The inversion on sexuality is indeed using tantric sexual energy to uh, siphon and to invert, and as a result of intense sexual trauma, and that can be restored. So an entire generation there's now in their late 20s and 30s, um, that is going through this evolution process towards their Pluto square, where we are the 40s, when Pluto will arrive at the middle phase of Aquarius, and see how willing consent wins the race. And how evolving towards willing consent is the success and the sense of power that they were looking for. Because what is power? Power is when you don't have to exert it, right? Not because people are terrified from you, because you don't, that's not even a question. Power essentially is connection, that the question of power ceased to be. Okay? That's when people have an orgasm. And that's success. Okay? You think about pleasure, you're being satisfied. Think about being satisfied with something. As you think about a good meal, okay, it's an orgasmic experience of tasting that, right? And you think about inversions of that as something that, you know, consequently yields epic failure. I cannot but think about Eliza's testimonial of her sexpionage experience and the way they took down the crime lord Marengo process, but the USSR fell. Why? Because that is an inversion on espionage. That you don't get a whole picture from a fractured soul or soil. Some sexpionage businesses running out of business right now. Um, but it's also an increased awareness that housing first, independently of ability to work, is a must to recover from trauma. Okay, so, and we have houses. If we had houses for all these refugees in the Netherlands, a small country, there's no housing problem anywhere in the world. We have houses. Netherlands doesn't build more than 3 stories up. We have houses. And the 3 stories up is the same apartment that has 3 stories because of the flood. We have housing. There is enough. Wow. It is the inversion on intelligence that makes empires fall. And that's not just, oh, Satan. No, that happens. They cut dividends to the Vatican. Which is, when you think about that, that's an inversion of religion. To do those practices, okay? Satanic ritual abuse is an inversion of religion, not because it's an antichrist, because that's done in church as well, even when it's not satanic. Listen to Ronald Bernard, okay? He was taken from his family to a church school, and they were raping him there, the church, the Christians. Then when he wanted to release from that, or somehow he wanted to go back and make money for his mom, somebody told him, I can help you, but you need to freeze your consciousness to minus 100 degrees, because not Fahrenheit, that's Celsius, that's way below the zero. Okay, I think 0 Celsius is about to do 20, 30 Fahrenheit. So about 100 below the zero. Okay, so that's a scale. And when it came to satanic church doing rituals in children, that's where Bernard tried to kill himself, because he didn't want to do it. And that's where he defreezed his consciousness. Okay. But if you don't have a lawyer office that could represent him as survivor of sex offenses in entire Netherlands, let's shed some light on that, because everybody busy with Tachin Dubai. What happened to my voice right now? Okay. Very interesting. Let's take a look at that. Oh, Venus is approaching Pluto. This is Mercury hour, though. Mercury is retrograde. Opposing Jupiter. Sextile in Lilith. So we have a conversation about topics that we already talked about. Okay, Tachi, alibi, sexpionage. I think we understand how they connect, okay? Mercury trining Chiron retrograde. So assertion of the self-boundaries. The fact that there would be no lawyer office to protect young Ronald Bernard when he went through sexual violence, horrid rape, and ritual abuse in church. Okay? Before he joined the set and whatever, just being a banker, that's what it meant. Because there is no lawyer office in the Netherlands that does not represent sex offenders. And now we're in 2024. Bernard, I don't know how old he is, but I think well past Pluto square. Okay, so I'm 40. And there's still no lawyer office to represent sex offenses victims until they become perpetrators. And then everybody wants to bring them into society. But how can we rehabilitate anybody without tending to when they're fending for them, advocating for them when they were victims? And we know that thanks to crime families. They don't want to get in jail because in jail is not happy life for people who do sex offenses against the children. The babies in Deming is appropriate to read about in that regard. So it's basically thanks to crime families because they held higher standards when it comes to children and women that we know that there is no lawyer to represent sex offenses victims in entire kingdom of Orange. That's where the ICC sits, International Court of Justice. Now, how do you sue the Netherlands for war crimes and where? Okay, it's probably not in The Hague, okay, is a question. How do you say it hypothetically? But if the Crown been involved with a military operation named COVID, according to Dutch government official, other news that are there, but you weren't seeing them on viral, it came out in the news. But if a tree falls in the forest and nobody knows, okay, X was fantastic about exposing information. Now, how, and we even had these testimonial on X. Now, how about competition to X? Because if X is a monopoly, then X will no longer be X, right? How does it work with drug dealers? They give you something to try, something to try. Then you got to begin to perform crime for them in order to get that something again. Now, in a healthy relationship, we talk about growth. If, for example, you date someone for a while, Venus Pluto beginning to come to action, okay, it's nice. And then you begin to grow together, which means you need to tend to the economy. If you want a house, what happens if you separate? How is the government affecting your success rates as a couple? How's the economy affecting that? How is the religion, okay, the spiritual beliefs that you hold affecting that? Are those up to date? Well, you're going to find out when there's a Uranus transit for sure. What I opened this morning with was a joke where I said, if there's a man checking me out and he's not single, then of course for me that's like not relevant. Um, but the thing is that I hold a space for his spouse or girlfriend because what I'm tending to right now is like they're probably like I'm not I can be pretty beautiful when I put on makeup and stuff, but I don't have the access to that. Um, and you know, I don't wear the finest clothes right now when I'm working in the garden, and so I'm not in the greatest fitness because I'm tending to psychic attacks and so on. There's a man checking me out right now. It's probably because of what I'm tending to. And I hold a space for the lady that tries to think, oh, what is missing in our relationship? Essence of desire. And on that note, I had a conversation, I was taking a conversation with that teacher today. She was in her 60s and she understood more what I'm talking about. She told me that her fellow teachers suddenly begin to have this sense of otherness to them. It's like, she said the word Teflon, which immediately, that's what she said. I don't know, okay? I'm just quoting her. They become like, she described it as you talk to a person, suddenly they are different and their sense of otherness is like closed, it's like Teflon. Okay, I have no idea. Okay, maybe they're taking out, I know of it with the Netherlands, they were called Mark Rutte Teflon Mark because his reputation was left undamaged. So maybe they were trying to take from his nervous system and to clone that so people will be able to get away with things and undamaged. I don't know, like you think about programming, but I have no idea because that's programming. Okay, and then the word Teflon, if you look at the nervous systems, like that's something that's related to something, or that's given Navo. You're not the head of Nava right now. So what does that entail if you're like the head of Nava? Like, is your nervous system being harvested in that way? I don't know. Or agenda continuity to WEF. I don't know. Um, but the way that we got to know each other is like she told me you're smelling amazing, and I was doing this Blue Lotus and Cistus and I don't know vanilla perfume. And I had it on, and so she asked me if I did it commercially. So I had to say to her, well, I had to speak a little bit of what I'm tending to because that would explain why it would be a problem for me to commercially do something, as there are a lot of people that would try to get at my business. And I said the problem is not just like my business or what I would be tending, but the fact that I'm tending to something, I cannot allow myself to be tending to those quarrels because there's these and those topics that I'm tending to, and that might mean somebody not being warned when this targeted for political assassination, or me not connecting or not exposing the fact that families of kidnapped people in Israel in the war do not receive help of army when it comes to remote viewing, which is how we usually locate missing people. A lot of people are not aware of that. So that's important information. I can't let myself do something like sell a perfume, which I could, and I make quite good. But it's not about me. It's like it's the composition of it. You can't really go wrong with some, rose and lotus and cistus. Like you blend it a little and it smells fantastic. You can't go wrong with that. Um, and that's expensive. Okay, but the thing is that I can't allow myself to tend to that, or to be, and to be another, taxation scandal, because I'm still recovering. So it's paperwork is not that accessible for me, and my sovereignty has to be maintained in the process because that's recovery. Okay, not the inversion of banking. That's a crime against humanity, which is punishable by death. And we're at the side of the people doing, okay, the juristic process. And so when you cannot find in the entire kingdom of Orange a lawyer that will represent you because you don't have enough white, not in your skin color even, but in grams of white, then it's a problem. You got to search for other routes, right? to do right, you got to search for other routes. And so I can't grow a business and make money, because then there would be this protection over here. There's those people that try to confiscate your wealth over there. There's tax trying to confiscate your wealth over there. And not because I have problem with pay taxes, not at all even, but it's A, where the taxes are going, and the B, and I didn't think about it because I got funding, but there was a process to how okay, there was an inversion of so many things with tremendous corruption to that. Okay, if you think about the sex trafficking, you think about a field of butchered people in the World War, because they were doing sex trafficking for marriage, sex trafficking for dating, sex trafficking as bosses, sex trafficking in the army, sex trafficking when they came back from the army, sex trafficking to supposedly recover, sex trafficking for the intelligence, sex trafficking for getting out of the intelligence, so that compiles, that compound interest to a field of butchered bodies of generations of people who did that endeavor. This is why our goal is bodies upon bodies, and the women that cooperated with putting women into sex trafficking they go along with them. Or they manage to kill themselves, okay? And you see that Pluto in 0-degree Aquarius is trining Algol. It cannot be the inversion of Algol. It's about believing the person and getting out of the situation of participating in sex trafficking. Okay? That's the meaning of being believed. It's like, hey, you're seeing your belief now. What you need is housing first. What you need is, okay, there's going to be bodies upon bodies, because to take out sex trafficking, even when we talk about, the victims, they are okay with death. So you think about when they exploded the ghettos, they weren't sparing the people inside. So definitely they weren't sparing the capos. Okay? It's not about a judgment about a capo. But nobody's going to spare you if you cooperate with putting someone sexually, astrally assaulting someone, putting them in sex trafficking, cooperating with that, okay? Nobody's going to, like, you're in a seizure of MK Ultra, you're dead. And that's pertaining to all of us, okay? Because I know if I was in a seizure or something like that, and somebody had to fend for themselves, for me, like not raping them or something like that, I could get killed. Naturally, they have to fend for themselves, right? Or if there is, you live in a building, in a tall building, and in the basement underground there's sex trafficking, some child decides to blow entire place up, you get a 9/11, okay? All the rest of the children, they also die. It's affecting everyone, but sex trafficking is affecting everyone. You now have a global government that's made of the expendable children that they didn't manage to kill. How do you like the policies so far? How do you like the policies? How do you like the global policies? Do we need to tend to those problems as well? We can't do that where entire Kingdom of Orange, where you have the ICC, does not have one single lawyer office that does not represent sex offenders and is dedicated to representing sex offenses victims. Now, it's also important to discuss the fact that when it happens, not only to boys, but also to girls, and not only to girls, but also to boys, it's not like you have a talking person, expressive person, because that's the nature of the offense. And this is why the voicing oneself and being believed not by force is the curation. This is why any defamation lawsuits in regards to sexual boundary violations victims who speak up are illegal. They are a crime against humanity, because this is not only murdering the soul. People commit suicide for a reason. Most cases we have for mental crisis in Netherlands that people come to ask for assisted death is due to sexual boundary violations. They're being a victim of that. Now, it's very difficult to market to a society of people that have been born into abuse and rape, and how to perpetuate that to stay alive. So we want to accommodate for that and accommodate for that. Anyway, rape can't go on, right? Venus is trining Uranus for a reason. This Uranus is lovely. It's exact trine. As she sextiles Neptune. And applying to sextile Rahu. So it's the good aspect between Rahu and the Ketu is perfected. Pluto is now trining, sextiling the nodes, okay? It's within orb. This is so fantastic as we embark from justice, the old way of doing the juristic procedure, into procedures that support sovereignty and honoring our sovereignty. And the structures, okay, that support honoring our sovereignty, or decomposition of the structures that were taken away from our sovereignty, which is basically rape structures. It's a decomposition. That means death to those who participate in raping people. Okay, unless the rape stops. Any solution to the conflict cannot be by raping another person. Okay, that works both ways, right? Perpetuating rape. Okay, now of course, if you send a psychic attack to someone it backfires, you send a psychic attack to someone it backfires. Okay, but other than that, okay, trying to put other people into being raped can no longer hold. Trying to take a person who's recovering from sexual boundary violation, okay, if I put them again into the situation, that's bodies upon bodies, not just two generations of men, two generations also of the women that were vouching for this man. And that's not something you can gaslight away. This is core essence. This is where there has to be a breakthrough, and the conditions are allowed. This is where you understand that karmic justice is not raping this race now, or this culture now, or this gender now. Okay? Because all of them is the same lodges, and that's an image of divide and conquer, where all of them is the same lodges, they're doing the same things. And it's an understanding that women that cooperate with raping women are they're going south together with the men that do that. We are purging the women that were a part of this trade in women and children. This is Ketu Libra. Okay, old judges, old female judges that did, let's say, even feminism in the way that is not in alignment with the will and consent. That's better perception. You think about the algal talisman as the mirror. You can point a mirror at somebody who points at you at a mirror, but it's not going to work because it's not just about putting a mirror at somebody who puts in you a mirror. Okay, it's not Jung. Jung molested his patient. He knew that. He later made a rule that you cannot sleep with the patient because of that. We're not just talking sexpionage, it's an act of molestation, because to sexually attack someone, you need to bring them into a position where they are like an infant, that they cannot, okay, resist and so on. And this is an act of molestation, essentially. That's what it reenacts, okay? That's why it's used for sexpionage, because you get the person to the infant stage and then you program them. That's the point. And that damn fuckery needs to go. You don't get women's rights with raping women. Okay? You don't get women's rights with shaming women for their sexuality. You don't get women's rights with ignoring the fact that the person that went through rape and so on and so forth and is programmed has less self-trust and agency. Okay? And is more susceptible to love bombing. So the word cheating in that regard is rendered useless. There's no, you don't get women's rights by understanding that what we call traitors are sex trafficked children that survived it somehow. You don't get commitment when your spouse is molesting or love bombing, or that there is sexpionage going. So if, let's say, your spouse is a political figure or public figure, okay, like there's, if I think about, if I didn't have the ability to enforce my willing consent, and I'm still battling this battle, by the way, then I'd be trafficked and I would be without Peter when he was alive, and 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 then either I would assassinate him or somebody else would, with the information that I would give, being dissociated and not remembering anything, and I would be programmed to seduce him as well. You didn't need a lot to seduce Peter, okay? He was a people's person, but you think, I'm gonna say it, if your family don't watch, but the thing is that if you think about the way the police was parting like the Nile when Peter didn't want to be kidnapped by the police when he was on the threat on the hit list in 2019, and later was assassinated in July 6, 2021, versus the way that the police gathered around him when some married woman called, Misdaad Verslagen for phone to order in petite mode. So there were police officers. I'm not joking. I saw this video. It's so funny. He comes to the doorway of this visit to meet that woman, and he's bombarded by police officers, and are like arresting him for like going to a married woman to have sex. She called him. She invited him in. Okay. I need to see a chart right now. His eyes is, oh, ascendant was on his Saturn. Saturn is what killed him. Saturn is an eye chart. Ascendant was on his Saturn. Mercury hour. Yeah, nothing much. And Saturn on the IC, but that's just too far. But that was, but you see about how the police functions, where there's actual life risk versus a person going to have completely willing consent with sex with a woman who's married, okay? So, you don't get women's rights by calling on the police on what you think is your cheating spouse. Have a conversation, see what's missing, okay? You really had a fantasy, like whatever, okay? And so, but with sexpionages, is what's happened is that the woman is considered a whore. Her father, think about Eliza. She's not in contact with her father. Her father sent his daughter to a Royal Academy for Security. She gets raped, tortured, and then they believe she's a whore. Why do they believe she's a whore? She comes back, she looks like a model. Maybe her sexual behavior is accentuated because she had to learn to use that to be raped by only one person and to assert of her boundaries, even though she's not having sex that she wants, and try to trick her nervous system to like to have sex with this person. Without feelings, okay? So robotic sex, okay? And to look very natural and not robotic doing that. And so you meet a person's totally fractured and you think, oh, his daughter has become a whore. And so the father's not in contact with his daughter because he thinks he's a whore. She went away to the US here working as a model and trying to teach like sexpionage tricks to seduction, and telling her story about how importance of willing consent also within espionage. I couldn't agree more. She was used to knock down a drug dealer, a cartel lord, and the USSR fell. She wasn't working against the government, but the government fell. Why? Because they were using sexpionage. You can get dachi. You know? I'd say even more than that. You can get the Lana, but did you get a WHO? Because the guy that was the diddler, that wanted to be the diddler for me, is a remote viewer. That's that Ido Nevo. And I don't know what sexpionage is sent to Peter, which would not be a problem at all. If you're in any way, and when, sexpionage is okay, they go through the surgeries, they go through with the makeup, they go through, okay, training routine, okay, they learn to be seductress, okay, there would not be an issue. And that's a part of why you would be in such positions. You would not have commitment that is so strong. You need the commitment to be relaxed, because things can happen, right? And it doesn't wait on the marriage, and it has to be both sides. And that was indeed the type of relationship that he was having. But the thing is, it would not be a problem to get to Peter in that way. And then there is exchange of information. Okay, what did he like? What kinks did he like? What does he like to do to you? You begin to learn for his sexual drive. What does he want? What is he turned on by? What are the things that are going through the psyche? Okay. Where did he like to meet with you? Okay, where does it go? What was the arrangement? Is that arrangement? Did you get that arrangement? The guy goes out. You get the Delano guy, and that's it. Now, you cannot stop that from happening to the family, happening to Royce, especially because he's continued like his father's path, without attending to why was he assassinated, because he spoke against the WHO. And when you get the father, you want to make sure that the lineage, the minute you rely on, or you continue on that, they're like, okay, the sets of potential, we saw what was the father doing, but the sets of potential here is tremendous. You have to tend to not having, it's a life and death issue to not be surrounded by sexpionages. What are you going to do? Stop having sex? There's a difference between seduction and from a Venusian healthy place, not fractured, and somebody that gives you hypnotic commands. You have to be a part of this initiatory phase that make you more susceptible to that. You have to get that from the creation of sexpionages. You can't play on respect. She's a whore. She's a this. Or if you're a spouse of a person like that, she's a whore. She's a this. She's a that. She's a. What are you waiting to be up next? You can be kidnapped. Okay. You think about, okay, the sexpionage going, well, what about the spouse? What about this? What about that? One very smart thing that Ido's wife did was, like in my post where I talked about the coercion that tried to get me to be like back then I thought it was a prostitute, or like, sugaring or whatnot. And I'm like, no, that's getting me, that will get me yeasty. Like, let's just put it that way. The inversion of sex. And that's a very smart thing, because she was symbolizing me that she sees me and believes me, So she was off the hit list. Very simply put, okay? When a person is like, first of all, you don't know that that's espionage. You don't know what happened to you, and when you begin to find out, it was like that was rape, and then you find out that the spouse thinks that you're a whore. What do you feel? You hate the spouse more than you hate the rapist. That's actually okay. People tend to hate the surrounding of the offender more than the offender. The people that comply, the people that allow that to happen. And you think about these women being programmed to have, in the hardcore MK Ultra, they're programmed to have, I'm sorry, violent sex, and kind of like to be more asquiashing the more that they have that. With those things, that's what Handsome Admiral was exposing. Then that woman wouldn't even understand what went on. But you think about Handsome Admiral calling his wife a whore and a bitch and that because she denied him sex. She couldn't have sex with him in a non-program situation. She couldn't have sex because she was a survivor of rape. Okay, so this is a dumb fuckery, intricate situation, but we can't fend for like the sex offender, okay, without tending to sexpionage and tending to the victim. We can't do it with she's a whore, she's disrespectful, she blah blah blah, she blah blah blah. But darling, okay, your husband or your boyfriend or your wife, okay, or your girlfriend slept with them, okay. So that's something is like, for people, but for Peter, he solved that problem quite elegant. It's like he's not monogamous, but still is not tending to the creation of the sexpionages. And we all know why, because when they grow up in these cults, everybody has to do that to everybody, okay? But to not be assassinated, to prevent political assassination, that has to prevent political assassination. You have to invert the inversions, to flip it back, and that remains the change in the masonry. To not have satanic ritual abuse, to not have, and when you tend to that when it's small, you're kind of like, okay, that complicates to you have to, at all levels of existence, we begin to tend to those complications, how to untangle for these complications. So for example, housing first independently of ability to work means that we need to have that for, let's say, a woman that is a madam or owns in sexpionages, because she doesn't want to be trafficked, which won't help her eventually. Same for the man as well. And we need to have housing for her and for the women, and we need to be separate because they were in situation, one was the victim, one was the perpetrator. And we have housing, okay? That's not a problem. We have housing. We had housing for all the refugees in Netherlands during COVID. We have housing. But if you understand that political assassination, what precedes that has to do with sexpionage, more often than not with children. Even when we talk about an adult woman, is the inversion of the innocence, the natural innocence of the sexuality that allows for will and consent, is a childlike figurine. Okay? And you listen to Annika Lucas talking about the sexualization of girls, and the fact that even as an adult woman, you had to be like a girl to be attractive, like a little girl, okay, to be attractive. And how that holds with the grief of, like, father figures and molestation or whatnot, okay. either going missing or having a present molesting character. Um, for some, I ran into women that had the present molesting father. That even when the mother divorced and would go with the mother, the father would come to sing serenades on her windows of the daughter. And she doesn't say, is she believing, she don't believe? Well, eventually when she had a house of her own that her mother could support, and she was growing a garden, then she began to heal, and then she had a boyfriend she was happy with. Because all that much power, where, and that was the problem, not a missing father, but a molesting father. It's another form of missing, because the father is missing. The actual father there is missing. And those things that the Scorpio Pluto generation cannot not tend to. Okay, for some it ain't even the square yet. It's only the first few degrees. But Pluto is ushering us from purging the old notions of the way we do relations, Libra, juristics, and trade, to a more sovereign and a more informed of programming, global governments, the inversion of surveillance. It's not even surveillance, because the fractured soul cannot give you a whole picture, and the fractured soil as well. If someone's in the process of making a soil fertile, they're in the process of holding place for love. There's certain things that they cannot, like a person that's been continuously molested doesn't understand, let's say, the betrayal feelings of cheating. They're like, it's not anywhere near that level of conversation. Okay, a person that grew up, let's say, without a father, they don't understand what's the feeling of, let's say, losing a father, because they grew up without, okay? And to cope with that, they had to say, well, all around me, there are fathers that beat their children, there are fathers that even rape their children. It's like, I'm lucky, I'm privileged. It's very difficult to begin to even understand that. And a person that had to assert the sexual boundaries entire life through and still deals with that, it's very difficult to understand what is a person having willing consent feeling upon like cheating, or upon like, it's like, and that's like, they never even had the sacred. They never even had that place that was sacred. And this is also, unfortunately, how British sexpionages affect all of us, because when it translates to, going from another culture, it translates to people that have a happy, healthy, loving home, perhaps, and then that's fractured. But what's fracturing that is something that's way deeper than what they can even imagine. And I think a lot with the MK Ultra, we place sovereignty on something that is not sovereign and still needs to be sovereign. And that is a question of resources as well.